Title: The Dual-Track Consolidator, an operational manual for America First Republican Congressman. Preambles. The victory of an America First candidate on election night marks the start of the real contest. Outsiders who reach Congress frequently discover that the institution they sought to reform begins reforming them instead. Committee roles turn into traps of incrementalism. Staff selections default to insiders fluent in the language of compromise. Priorities drift from hard sovereignty and restraint toward managed continuity with legacy foreign policy patterns. The result is often a slow neutralization of the mandate voters delivered. This manual is written to prevent that outcome. The dual-track consolidator supplies a disciplined operational doctrine for the America First Republican Congressman and his core team. Its purpose is to convert electoral success into durable institutional power while preserving the mission, advance policies that place the concrete interests of American citizens, security, prosperity, liberty, and self-government, first, without exception or sentimental attachment. America First is a governing logic of realism and reciprocity. It insists on national sovereignty and physical border control as the bedrock of any legitimate republic. Economic nationalism to restore manufacturing capacity, supply chain security, and trade arrangements that benefit American workers over global abstractions. Fiscal responsibility that treats the $36+ trillion debt as a national security emergency, requiring hard choices on spending, entitlements, and baselines. Energy dominance achieved through full domestic production, not performative gestures. Constitutional governance that rolls back administrative state overreach, restores enumerated powers, and rejects judicial or international encroachment. Foreign policy restraint rooted in strict transactional assessment. Every relationship, aid package, or alliance must demonstrably serve American leverage and autonomy. External entanglements that drain resources, invite unnecessary risks, or empower foreign lobbying inside U.S. institutions must be managed downward. This last pillar requires particular clarity. The United States maintains numerous relationships with other nations, but none are permanent or sentimental. Each must be evaluated by net benefit to American taxpayers, strategic independence, and domestic priorities. Countries that engage in consistent intervention in U.S. policymaking, through lobbying networks, campaign influence, or pressure on elected officials, warrant managed distance rather than reflexive partnership. Influence operations that distort appropriations, shield activities from scrutiny, or prioritize external agendas over American fiscal and sovereignty metrics are incompatible with genuine America First governance. This standard applies uniformly across all actors, adversarial or otherwise, without exemptions based on historical narratives or domestic political coalitions. The dual-track model is the practical instrument for operating inside this reality. It separates visible action from internal execution to protect both effectiveness and credibility. Track 1: Public Visible. The right hand advances the outward agenda. It delivers clear constituent-focused results on border metrics, spending restraint, energy production, trade reciprocity, and transparency reforms. Communication channels, direct constituent updates, alternative media, oversight hearings, emphasize measurable deliverables, fewer illegal crossings, reduced deficits, restored industrial base, and restored congressional primacy. This track preserves the outsider mandate and builds sustained public legitimacy. Track 2: Operational Internal. The left hand executes the quieter work of power consolidation. It maps institutional nodes, places aligned personnel, builds parallel policy capacity, and systematically reduces pathways for external distortion of U.S. decision-making. Strict compartmentalization prevents leaks, ethical exposure, or narrative attacks. The Congressman maintains public unity where tactically necessary while the operational track advances structural advantages. This separation is essential because Congress functions as a system of staff expertise, procedural choke points, donor leverage, committee hierarchies, and information control. New members enter at a disadvantage. Leadership assigns weak committees. Legacy staff dominate institutional memory. Foreign and domestic lobbying ecosystems exploit these asymmetries. The dual-track approach treats these realities as terrain to be mastered rather than lamented. Personnel is the decisive domain. A well-vetted staff director on appropriations or general counsel on judiciary can redirect millions in outcomes and block adverse measures for years. An unvetted chief of staff with external ties can quietly dilute the agenda. Section 2 therefore emphasizes rigorous recruitment, dual-track placement, and vetting protocols that screen for consistency on sovereignty issues, including uniform skepticism toward any foreign principles penetration of U.S. processes. Past employment with major lobbying entities, donor ecosystems, or organizations that blur foreign and domestic advocacy lines must be weighed heavily. Institutional reconnaissance, Phase II, will document how influence actually operates. Committee staff alignments, revolving-door patterns, campaign financing channels, and pressure on key votes. The goal is not theatrical confrontation, but methodical delayering, strengthening FARA enforcement, closing disclosure loopholes for entities acting as de facto foreign agents, expanding cooling-off periods, and imposing greater transparency on foreign-linked funding to universities, NGOs, and think tanks. These tools apply across the board to adversarial states, and to any relationship that creates recurring fiscal burdens or policy drag without clear, time-limited American advantage. The manual does not assume ideological uniformity, even among self-described America First members. Tactical alignments on China containment, border enforcement, or regulatory relief may be possible with colleagues who differ on specific bilateral relationships. Those differences are managed through compartmentalization and metrics rather than public fracture. The operational track maintains focus on net outcomes, reduced foreign aid baselines overall, measurable decreases in external leverage on appropriations and foreign policy committees, and early indicators of mission drift, such as softening on transparency bills or staff migration toward high-influence external roles. Success is defined rigorously. By the close of the 119th Congress, the office should show concrete advances, procedural changes increasing member and public oversight, appropriations riders enforcing restraint, higher FARA compliance and penalties, expanded America First staffing depth, and groundwork for majority reinforcement in 2026. Long-term entrenchment requires succession planning, identifying and developing junior legislators and staff who treat sovereignty as non-negotiable and foreign influence as a standing threat to be contained. Failure modes are clear. Mission absorption occurs when the member internalizes conference consensus, accepts perpetual commitments as normal, or allows external networks to shape priorities. Self-isolation occurs when purity tests shrink coalitions needed for procedural victories. The dual-track model counters both by preserving public credibility while executing internal realism. This doctrine draws from the structural logic of republics. Institutions resist outsiders unless countered with superior organization. The founders warned against foreign influence and permanent foreign attachments that compromise independence. In the current environment, great power competition, technological vulnerabilities, demographic fiscal pressures, and sophisticated lobbying ecosystems, America First updates those warnings into operational practice. It treats no relationship as sacred, and every influence channel as subject to audit and reduction where it conflicts with American primacy. The Congressman who implements this manual must cultivate disciplined duality, an authentic public voice delivering results, paired with private mastery of institutional mechanics. Criticism will come from multiple quarters, establishment voices labeling reforms as disruptive, activist flanks demanding faster purity, media framing internal mapping as paranoia. Resilience comes from documentation, regular ethics reviews, and relentless focus on KPIs. Border encounters, debt trajectory, domestic energy output, foreign influence expenditures, and committee-level sovereignty metrics. This manual is organized into 4 phases. Phase I covers immediate transition and firewall construction. Phase II addresses reconnaissance and classification of resistance nodes. Phase III focuses on controlled capture, parallel structures, and delayering. Phase IV emphasizes entrenchment, midterm strategy, metrics of renewal and succession. Use it as doctrine. Reference it repeatedly. Delegate execution while the principle internalizes the strategic logic. Electoral victory places the team inside the machine. The dual-track consolidator equips you to repurpose that machine for American renewal rather than being repurposed by it. Public results protected by operational discipline. Visible sovereignty backed by invisible structural consolidation. This is how an America First mandate becomes enduring institutional reality rather than a single-cycle protest. The work begins now. Section 1. The Inauguration and Leadership Firewall. The period between Election Day and the swearing-in of the new Congress is deceptively calm. For an America First congressman, it is the critical window to establish defensive positions against institutional absorption. The leadership firewall must be constructed immediately. Once the gavel falls on the first day of the 120th Congress, the default currents, leadership pressure, legacy staff recommendations, donor expectations, and procedural inertia, begin pulling even determined reformers toward the center of the machine. This section details the three core components of Phase I: securing strategic committee assignments, executing a clean majority staff transition with America First alignment, and implementing rigorous compartmentalization across personal office, committee, and leadership roles. The objective is to create structural insulation that protects the Sovereignty First mandate while enabling effective navigation of House rules and Republican conference dynamics. Execution in these first weeks determines whether the member becomes a vector for America First consolidation or another assimilated voice issuing press releases, while legacy priorities advance. 1.1 Securing strategic committee assignments, appropriations, judiciary, intelligence, foreign affairs, rules. Committee assignments are the primary source of institutional leverage. A member relegated to low-influence panels, small business, Veterans Affairs spends 2 years with limited staff resources, weak amendment power, and minimal ability to shape outcomes on core America First issues. Strategic committees provide direct jurisdiction over spending, legal architecture, intelligence oversight, foreign policy baselines, and procedural rules, the exact arteries through which foreign influence and spending inertia flow. Prioritization order for America First realism. 1. Appropriations, absolute top priority. This committee controls the purse. Every foreign aid package, domestic enforcement funding level, and agency budget originates or is modified here. Placement allows riders limiting aid to countries with histories of U.S. policy intervention, conditioning funds on verifiable reciprocity, and enforcing zero-based budgeting on legacy programs. 2. Rules, second priority. The gatekeeper of the floor. Control here determines which amendments reach debate and which sovereignty bills receive structured or open rules. An America First member on rules can block leadership from shielding foreign entanglements or bloated continuing resolutions. 3. Judiciary, critical for immigration enforcement, FARA strengthening, and oversight of administrative state weaponization. This committee handles bills on border security metrics, foreign agent registration penalties, and challenges to executive agreements that bypass Senate treaty processes. 4. Intelligence, essential for classified briefings on adversarial foreign influence, China, Qatar, Russia, and monitoring domestic lobbying networks that operate through cutouts, provides visibility into threats without public theater. 5. Foreign affairs, valuable for direct oversight of aid packages, treaty implementation, and State Department operations. Used to push transactional reviews of all bilateral relationships, emphasizing net American benefit and managed distance from nations with active intervention patterns in U.S. domestic politics. Tactics for acquisition, November, early January. Pre-election preparation, ideally before Election Day, quietly signal priorities to incoming House leadership and steering committee members. Identify 3-5 reliable America First or restraint-oriented members already serving who can advocate internally. Draft a 1-page assignment justification memo, framing requests around restoring congressional sovereignty over spending and foreign policy. Emphasize district needs only as secondary, e.g. manufacturing districts for trade reciprocity. Immediate post-election outreach, days 1-7. The Congressman personally calls the Speaker-elect Majority Leader and Steering Committee Chair. Follow with a formal written request copied to key allies. Example language. As a newly elected member committed to America First principles, I request assignment to the Appropriations Committee to ensure rigorous oversight of taxpayer funds, particularly foreign assistance programs that must demonstrate clear, time-limited benefits to U.S. security and economic interests. Complementary service on rules would enable procedural integrity for sovereignty legislation. leverage coalition building, coordinate with the Freedom Caucus, Republican Study Committee Restraint Wing and any new MAGA-aligned freshmen, pool votes for steering committee influence, historical precedent. The 2010 Tea Party wave secured better placements through organized demands. The 2023 Freedom Caucus negotiations extracted rules concessions, replicate but with tighter discipline. Fallback and sequencing. If full appropriations is blocked, request a key subcommittee, e.g., State Foreign Operations, Defense or Homeland Security. For Foreign Affairs, target subcommittees on Oversight and Middle East North Africa to apply consistent restraint standards across all relationships. Timeline milestones. Week 1 post-election. Secure written commitments from at least 2 leadership figures. December. Attend orientation sessions aggressively. Lobby steering committee members individually. Early January. Finalize assignments before organizational meetings. Pitfalls and countermeasures. Leadership may offer prestige, assignments e.g. energy and commerce as bait, decline gracefully while reiterating sovereignty priorities. Avoid appearing obstructive, frame as strengthening the conference's governing capacity. Track external pressure, note any coordinated calls from lobbying ecosystems pushing against your assignments. Log these privately for operational track use. Success metrics. Assignment to at least 2 priority committees. 1 must be appropriations or rules within the first organizational caucus meeting. Measured influence. Number of America First Amendments advanced in markups during the first session. 1.2 Majority staff transition and America First alignment. Staff is the force multiplier and the primary vulnerability. Legacy hires bring expertise but often carry institutional biases, donor relationships, and comfort with perpetual foreign commitments. A clean transition installs operators who treat every aid package, alliance, and influence channel through a strict transactional lens. Core principles for staffing. Loyalty to the America First mandate above personal advancement or conference harmony. Competence in legislative mechanics. Zero tolerance for unregistered or high-risk foreign contacts. Alignment on managed distance from relationships involving heavy U.S. intervention patterns. Step-by-step transition protocol. Immediate inventory, days 110 post-election. Request current office transition files from the outgoing member, if applicable, or House administration. Catalogue all existing staff, their portfolios, prior employers and notable connections. Identify carryover risks. Any staff with recent work for major foreign policy lobbies, think tanks funded by external principals, or roles involving uncritical advocacy for open-ended aid. B. Recruitment architecture, November-December. Dual track hiring. Public-facing, communications director, district director, scheduler, energetic, articulate, constituent-focused. These roles emphasize deliverables, town halls on border metrics, energy jobs reports. Operational, legislative director, LD, council, appropriations committee staff, realist operators comfortable with compartmentalization and sovereignty audits. Sources: America First aligned policy shops, state legislative alumni, military veterans with policy experience, conservative legal fellowships emphasizing restraint. Avoid default K Street pipelines. Vetting checklist, section 2.3 will expand. Foreign travel and contacts disclosure. Donor and lobbying history, via Open Secrets Legistorm. Rutun responses on key issues. How would you evaluate a $3+ billion annual assistance package to a nation with documented intervention in U.S. appropriations processes? Reference checks from at least 3 prior supervisors. See Onboarding and Alignment, January. Usher a 10-page Office Sovereignty Doctrine memo outlining expectations. All policy recommendations must include net American interest analysis, foreign influence risk assessment, and fiscal baseline impact. Conduct weekly alignment sessions in the first 60 days. Use scenario exercises. Draft an amendment reducing baseline foreign military financing by 20% with conditions on policy reciprocity. Kampan Sutpan, competitive but not extravagant. Tie bonuses to measurable outcomes, bills advanced, amendments passed, constituent casework metrics. Examples from recent cycles. Mumbas entering in 2018-2022, who prioritized early staff overhaul, e.g., those associated with House Freedom Caucus, maintained higher voting cohesion on restraint measures compared to those who inherited full legacy teams. Conversely, several 2020 freshmen with heavy establishment staffing saw rapid softening on spending and foreign policy baselines within 18 months. Pitfalls as Proshka to hire experienced staff recommended by leadership, politely accept resumes but apply independent vetting. Talent scarcity, America First operators skilled in appropriations are rare. Invest in training junior hires with strong instincts. Burnout risk, compartmentalized roles create isolation. Schedule regular principal check-ins while protecting operational sensitivity. Success metrics, 70% plus of senior staff, LD, COS, Council, key committee designees, replaced with VUTAD America First personnel by February 1. 0 high-risk foreign ties identified in post-hire audits. 1.3 Personal office, committee, and leadership compartmentalization. Compartmentalization is the firewall's foundation. Information, decision authority, and relationships must be deliberately segmented to prevent leaks, cross-contamination, and external mapping of your operation. Structural design. Personal office. Chief of Staff COS serves as primary gatekeeper, but operates on need-to-know for operational track items. Croata 2 internal teams with limited overlap. A Vuzabla team handles press district scheduling casework. A operational team handles committee prep bill drafting on sovereignty issues influence mapping, reports through dedicated channels, e.g. encrypted platforms. Physical/logistical, use separate drives or folders. Implement weekly Track 1 summaries for the full office. Restrict Track 2 briefings to principal plus 2-3 cleared individuals. Committee assignments. Designate a senior committee staffer, your direct hire, as the operational lead. This person liaises with committee majority staff, but maintains independent analysis. Exemplar. On appropriations, your designee prepares parallel markups evaluating every foreign operations line item against America First criteria, cost, reciprocity, intervention history, before engaging full committee processes. Foul rule, committee staff never brief the entire personal office on sensitive reconnaissance, channel through COS or LD. Leadership and conference relations. Maintain cordial public engagement with speaker, whip and committee chairs. Attend all required meetings. Provert track, develop independent intelligence via trusted allies. Never share operational staffing plans or influence reduction targets in leadership settings. Exemplar scenario. During a foreign affairs markup on assistance packages, publicly support a review process amendment while operationally prepare riders that impose strict conditions or reductions on relationships showing high U.S. policy intervention. Implementation tools. Dasajan matrix template. For every major issue, score on 1. Sovereignty impact, 2. Fiscal cost, 3. Foreign influence risk, 4. Domestic political feasibility. Communications protocol. Public statements cleared through visible team. Internal memos on influence networks use code references where helpful. Ethics and documentation. Engage House Ethics Council early for compartmentalization guidance. Maintain personal logs off-network of key decisions. Timeline for firewall activation. WUC 1 UG chart and protocol memo distributed. WUC 2 initial compartmentalization training for senior staff. Ungarung monthly audits of information flow, adjust as needed. Pitfalls and mitigation. Stuff resentment of two-tier structure. Frame as standard operational security for high-stakes governance. Ladashup probes for disloyalty. Respond with results-focused language, focused on delivering measurable wins for American taxpayers. Mudera or opponent leaks. Strict no comment on internal processes rule. Longer-term integration. By the end of the first quarter, the firewall should feel natural. The public track project's competence and constituent focus. We secured X% reduction in wasteful foreign spending commitments. The operational track quietly advances placements, maps nodes, and prepares structural reforms. This leadership firewall turns the post-inauguration period from vulnerability into decisive advantage. It positions the America First Congressman not as a disruptive outsider to be managed, but as a disciplined operator building enduring capacity. The institution will test these answers immediately through committee referral decisions, staff poaching attempts, and early must-pass legislation. Hold the line. Practical templates included: 1. Committee request letter, sample provided above. 2. Staff vetting questionnaire, 30 questions covering foreign policy consistency, past employers, etc. 3. UFAS doctrine memo, 10-page outline on sovereignty metrics. 4. Compartmentalization checklist, daily weekly protocols. Section 2. Personnel architecture for America First governance. Personnel is the decisive battlefield in congressional operations. Committees, hearings, markups, amendments, and long-term strategy are all executed through staff. A single misaligned legislative director or appropriations subcommittee staffer can quietly dilute sovereignty priorities, soften language on foreign influence reforms, or normalize perpetual commitments that drain American resources. Conversely, a tightly aligned team can redirect millions in appropriations, expose influence channels, and build parallel capacity that outlasts any single Congress. This section establishes the personnel doctrine for the America First Congressman. It covers recruiting loyal and competent staff, 2.1, implementing dual-track placement, 2.2, and executing rigorous vetting protocols focused on foreign influence vulnerabilities, 2.3. The objective is to construct a human firewall that resists institutional absorption while delivering measurable governance results. The guiding principle is strict transactional realism. Every staff member must evaluate policy through the lens of net American benefit. Relationships with foreign nations are not permanent friendships, but managed arrangements subject to continuous audit. Any pattern of external intervention in U.S. decision-making, through lobbying, campaign pressure, revolving-door incentives, or policy distortion, warrants heightened scrutiny and managed distance. This standard applies uniformly, without exemptions. 2.1. Recruiting loyal and competent America First staff. Recruitment must begin immediately after Election Day and accelerate through orientation. Default to experienced Washington hands, and the office will inherit the very inertia it was elected to disrupt. Recruitment philosophy. Loyalty first. Staff must prioritize the Congressman's America First mandate over personal career advancement, conference popularity, or external donor approval. Competenza second. Legislative drafting, appropriations mechanics, intelligence briefings, and constituent services require real skill. Raw loyalty without execution capacity produces ineffective martyrs. Temperament third. Candidates must handle compartmentalization, withstand pressure, and maintain discretion. Primary talent pipelines, ranked by reliability for sovereignty focus. 1. STUT legislative and executive alumni, former chiefs of staff, policy directors, or counsel from America First governors or state legislators. They understand enforcement metrics, border, spending, and often bring skepticism toward federal foreign policy consensus. 2. Military and intelligence veterans, officers with operational experience in logistics, intelligence analysis, or acquisition. Prioritize those who witnessed resource drains from open-ended commitments and favor transactional restraint. 3. Palasa shops and fellowships aligned with restraint, organizations focused on sovereignty, fiscal limits, and foreign policy realism, e.g. those emphasizing constitutional non-intervention and audit of all external influence. Avoid groups with heavy institutional foreign policy ties. 4. District-level operators, local campaign staff, county officials, or business leaders with proven America First records. These provide authentic constituent grounding and lower risk of imported Washington norms. 5. Junior talent pools, recent graduates from programs emphasizing originalist constitutionalism or economic nationalism. Invest in training, they often show higher long-term loyalty. Recruitment tactics and timeline. November post-election, post targeted job listings on platforms used by restraint-oriented conservatives. Use private networks, Freedom Caucus member offices, state party chairs and vetted alumni lists. Avoid public LinkedIn blasts that attract establishment applicants. December, conduct initial screening calls. Use a standardized 5-question phone script. 1. What does America first mean to you in foreign policy terms? 2. How should Congress evaluate multi-billion-dollar assistance packages? 3. Describe a time you pushed back against institutional pressure. 4. Walk through your experience with appropriations or oversight. 5. Are you comfortable with strict information compartmentalization? January onboarding wave. Aim for 60-70% senior staff turnover by February 1. Offer 6-month probationary periods tied to performance metrics. Compensation strategy. Base salaries competitive with house norms. Use house compensation study data. Add performance bonuses linked to deliverables. Successful amendments, reduced baseline spending identified, FARA-related oversight advanced. Cap total compensation to avoid creating future revolving door temptations. Example recruitment success patterns in recent cycles. Members entering Congress in 2022-2024 who recruited heavily from state-level America First networks, e.g., Texas, Florida, Ohio, maintained stronger cohesion on sovereignty votes compared to those relying on K Street recommendations. One freshman who hired a former state budget director as LD successfully advanced multiple riders, limiting foreign operations funding in their first appropriations cycle, while peers with legacy staffing saw those same efforts neutralized in committee. Common pitfalls as over-reliance on experienced staff recommended by leadership or senior members. These candidates often carry subtle institutional biases favoring continuity in foreign engagements. Ignoring red flags during rushed hiring. The first 90 days are chaotic, poor early choices compound. Neglecting diversity of skills. Balance ideologues with technicians who can navigate CBO scoring, parliamentary procedure, and budget reconciliation. Metrics for recruitment success. 75% of core positions, COS, LD, Council, Press Secretary, Appropriations Committee designees, filled with vetted America First personnel by end of February. Average tenure projection. Minimum 18-24 months for senior roles to ensure continuity through midterms. 2.2 Dual-track placement. High optical public-facing vs. operational realists. The dual-track model requires deliberate staff segmentation. Public-facing roles maintain the inspirational, constituent visible America First brand. Operational roles execute the harder work of mapping, placement, and influence reduction with minimal visibility. Track 1. High optical public-facing roles. Chief of Staff visible lead. Manages overall office image, district operations, and high-level public coordination. Must project competence and accessibility. Communications Director. Crafts messaging on border metrics, energy jobs, spending restraint and transparency wins. Direct-to-constituent pipelines and alternative media are primary weapons. District Director and Scheduler. Ground operations in the home district. Emphasize town halls exposing waste, casework demonstrating results. Legislative correspondent/press aides. Handle visible sovereignty bills and oversight hearings as public platforms. These roles receive Track 1 summaries, aggregated wins, constituent polling, and forward-looking agenda items. They are kept deliberately separate from sensitive operational intelligence. Track 2 Operational realists. Legislative Director, Core Operational Hub, oversees bill drafting, amendment strategy, and committee coordination with a sovereignty-first filter on every issue. General Counsel/Senior Policy Counsel, focuses on FARA reforms, foreign influence oversight, and legal guardrails for delayering efforts. Appropriations/committee staff designees, embedded in priority committees, prepare independent analyses of every foreign operations line item, aid package, or authorization bill using strict net benefit criteria. Research/intelligence analyst, quiet role, tracks lobbying disclosures, revolving door patterns, and committee staff alignments, operates on strict need to know. Special projects coordinator, handles parallel working groups and America First caucus coordination. Placement architecture. Physical and digital separation, Assign operational staff to dedicated workspaces or remote secure setups when possible. Use encrypted platforms, Signal, secure congressional email folders, for Track 2 communications. Visible team uses standard house systems. Reporting lines. Operational leads report primarily through the COS, but with direct principal access for high-sensitivity items. Create a small sovereignty working group, 3-4 cleared individuals, that meets weekly in secure settings. Cross-track protocols. Weekly all-office meetings cover only Track 1. Monthly operational briefings are restricted. Staff must sign acknowledgements of compartmentalization rules. Rotation safeguards. Limit time in high-exposure operational roles to 18-24 months to prevent burnout or external targeting. Have succession ready within the team. Practical example: a member places a former military intelligence analyst as appropriations staff designee, Track 2. This staffer prepares parallel markups flagging assistance packages that show patterns of recipient intervention in U.S. appropriations or policy. Publicly, the office highlights targeted oversight yielding taxpayer savings. Operationally, the same staffer coordinates with allied members to build support for structural reforms like enhanced disclosure requirements. Pitfalls in dual-track execution. Leakage through informal office chatter. Enforce need to know ruthlessly. Violations trigger immediate probation or termination. Morale issues from perceived elite operational track. Counter with clear performance metrics and principal recognition of all contributions. External mapping. Lobbying networks will attempt to identify operational staff through social connections. Maintain low public profiles for these roles. Success metrics. 0 unauthorized information crossings between tracks in the first year. Operational team successfully advances at least 5-7 sovereignty-focused amendments or oversight requests per session that would not have occurred under legacy staffing. 2.3 Rigorous vetting for foreign influence vulnerabilities, including AIPAC foreign agents and K Street ties. Vetting is continuous, initial hire, 90-day review and annual audits. The focus is identifying vulnerabilities to any external principle that could distort America First priorities. Core vetting framework. Foreign influence screen. Examine all past and current contacts with foreign governments, embassies, or affiliated organizations. Flag extended travel, family ties, or consulting work involving nations with documented intervention patterns in U.S. policy. Lobbying and revolving door history. Use Open Secrets, Legistorm, and FARA databases. Any work with entities representing foreign principals, state or private, requires detailed explanation and risk assessment. Ideological and policy consistency. Written questionnaire and interview scenarios testing uniform application of restraint. Oh, how would you analyze assistance to a nation that actively lobbies U.S. committees on appropriations? Oh, describe appropriate congressional response to foreign funding of U.S. think tanks or universities. Oh, walk through a net benefit evaluation of multi-year military financing agreements. Donor and network mapping. Review FEC contributions, event attendance, and personal associations. Heavy involvement with single-issue ecosystems that pressure for uncritical support warrants caution. Psychological and loyalty assessment. Structured interviews probing responses to pressure scenarios. Background checks via third-party firms specializing in congressional staffing include social media deep dive and financial review for unusual foreign-linked income. Detailed vetting process. 1. Application phase. Resume plus 15 question sovereignty questionnaire. 2. Interview rounds, 3 stages policy alignment. Technical competence, compartmentalization stress test. 3. Reference and database checks, minimum 4 references, cross-check against lobbying disclosures. 4. Final principle review. Congressman personally interviews top candidates with focus on realism versus sentimentality in foreign relations. 5. Probationary period. First 90 days include shadow assignments and monthly evaluations. Red flag categories, automatic or high scrutiny. Recent employment with major foreign policy lobbying firms or affiliated PACs. Public statements or writings advocating unconditional alliances over transactional assessment. family or financial ties to entities receiving substantial U.S. assistance or engaged in U.S. influence operations. History of leaking or undermining prior principles on core issues. Example vetting application: a strong technical candidate with prior House Foreign Affairs experience applies for LD. Database review shows prior coordination with groups heavily involved in shielding specific aid packages from conditions. Interview reveals discomfort with uniform transparency reforms. Decision: pass over in favor of a candidate with state-level enforcement background who demonstrates consistent net benefit skepticism across all relationships. Ongoing monitoring. Annual financial disclosure reviews. Quarterly foreign contact reports required from all staff. Exit interviews and cooling off enforcement. Minimum 2-year ban on lobbying the office or relevant committees post-employment. Legal and ethical guardrails. Engage House Ethics Committee Counsel for all vetting templates. Document every decision to protect against claims of bias. Frame all processes as standard sovereignty and transparency due diligence. Metrics for vetting effectiveness. Less than 5% of hires flagged for post-hire foreign influence concerns. Staff-driven initiatives result in measurable reductions in external leverage points, tracked via lobbying disclosure trends and committee outcomes. Templates for Section 2. 1. Staff position descriptions, dual-track versions. 2. Sovereignty questionnaire, 25 questions. 3. Compartmentalization agreement, signed form. 4. Performance scorecard, sovereignty, competence, discretion metrics. Personnel architecture is not a one-time event, but the living foundation of dual-track success. A properly constructed team turns the congressman from isolated voice into institutional force multiplier. Invest the time up front. The institution will exploit any weakness in human infrastructure immediately, through co-option, leaks, or procedural isolation. Build it right, and the path to Phase II reconnaissance and Phase III capture becomes viable. Section 3. Knowledge transfer and initial legislative post. The transition from campaign to Congress is a knowledge bottleneck. Campaign teams excel at mobilization, messaging, and voter contact, but rarely possess deep institutional mechanics. Without deliberate knowledge transfer, the new office risks operating on outdated assumptions, reactive firefighting, and missed early leverage opportunities. Phase I culminates in this section, converting campaign energy into structured governance capacity through rigorous after-action reviews, a focused first 100 days and 119th Congress agenda, and full activation of the congressional dual-track firewall. This phase must be completed by the end of February in the new Congress. Speed matters. Leadership will push must-pass legislation, committee markups will begin, and external networks will test the new members' resolve on spending baselines and foreign policy continuity. A disciplined knowledge transfer process ensures the America First mandate survives contact with institutional reality. The underlying posture remains consistent. Foreign relationships are transactional arrangements evaluated strictly by net benefit to American sovereignty, fiscal health, and strategic autonomy. Any pattern of intervention in U.S. policymaking, lobbying pressure on appropriations, influence on committee staff, or distortion of oversight, triggers managed distance and enhanced scrutiny. This standard is applied uniformly as standard due diligence, not selective enforcement. 3.1 Campaign After-Action Reviews. After-action reviews, AARs, convert campaign lessons into congressional doctrine. They prevent repetition of tactical errors and identify scalable strengths for legislative execution. Timing and structure. Conduct the primary AAR in the 2 weeks immediately following Election Day, before staff transition accelerates. Format: structured 3-day offsite or secure virtual sessions, involving the congressman, campaign manager, senior campaign staff, and incoming chief of staff legislative director. Use a standardized template divided into 4 quadrants: what worked, what failed, surprises, and doctrine transfer. Key areas for review: messaging and public posture. Analyze which sovereignty themes resonated most. Border metrics, spending restraint, energy production, trade reciprocity, and opposition to external influence on U.S. decisions. Example: if campaign attacks on foreign aid baselines without clear American return consistently polled +12 points in the district, codify this into public track 1 communications, translate into hearing questions. What verifiable benefit to US taxpayers justifies continuation of this baseline level? Doctrine transfer, develop a sovereignty message bank, 50 pre-vetted talking points, social media templates and town hall scripts emphasizing transactional evaluation of all relationships. Voter and constituent intelligence, map high support precincts and issue intensities, identify districts where foreign policy restraint, reduced entanglements, audit of influence channels, performed strongly versus areas needing more economic nationalism framing. Identify early warning indicators of mission drift. If certain donor clusters pushed back hardest on restraint messaging, flag them for operational track monitoring without public acknowledgement. Operational campaign lessons. Data systems, which voter contact platforms scaled best, transfer these to district office casework and direct constituent updates. Opposition research effectiveness. Tactics used against legacy foreign policy advocates should inform oversight hearing preparation, e.g., public records on lobbying expenditures, revolving-door timelines. Team performance audit. Evaluate campaign staff for potential congressional transition. Identify operators who demonstrated discipline under pressure versus those prone to leaks or personalization of conflict. Example, a field director who maintained strict message discipline on fiscal restraint despite external pressure from allied interest groups is a strong candidate for district director. Conversely, staff who softened positions for coalition convenience require closer vetting. Pitfalls and countermeasures. Emotional bias. Victors often overcredit messaging and underanalyze structural factors. Use neutral third-party facilitators if internal discussions become defensive. Overgeneralization. A win in one cycle does not guarantee future success. Quantify results, e.g., border security messaging lifted turnout 8% in rural precincts. Security. Conduct AARs in secure locations. Never record sensitive operational insights that could leak. Output deliverables. 25-40 page AAR report marked internal dual-track use only. Prioritized list of 10-15 transferable assets, message frameworks, data models, personnel. Initial risk register, potential institutional friction points identified from campaign intelligence. Metrics for success. Completion of full AAR by November 20. At least 70% of campaign-derived insights incorporated into Office Doctrine Memo by January 15. 3.2 Crafting the first 100 days and 119th Congress agenda. The first 100 days sets the public narrative and establishes operational tempo. It must blend visible wins with quiet structural preparation. The broader 119th Congress agenda provides the multi-year roadmap. First 100 days framework, public track emphasis. Core pillars prioritized by sovereignty impact. 1. Border and sovereignty enforcement, weeks 130. Introduce or co-sponsor legislation mandating real-time border encounter metrics, interior enforcement funding increases, and asylum reform with strict reciprocity standards. Public events, district town halls with CBP data visuals, oversight requests to Homeland Security on foreign nationals with intervention patterns in U.S. policy ecosystems. 2. Fiscal restraint and appropriations discipline ongoing. Push for baseline reductions in foreign operations, accounts lacking clear, time-limited U.S. benefit. Example amendment. No funds may be expended on assistance to any nation whose agents or affiliated entities engaged in lobbying U.S. appropriations processes exceeding X threshold in the prior cycle. Visible deliverable. Successful floor speech or hearing exposing aggregate, foreign aid trajectory versus domestic infrastructure backlogs. 3. Energy dominance and economic nationalism, weeks 2060. Permitting reform bills and resolutions, supporting full domestic production. Trade reciprocity measures, requiring audit of partner nations, intervention in U.S. markets or policy. 4. Transparency and influence reform, quiet build, visible by day 60. Co-sponsor FARA strengthening legislation, increased penalties, closing 501, c. loopholes for de facto agents, foreign funding disclosure for policy influencing institutions. O. Frame publicly as restoring congressional independence from all external principles. Execution tactics. Bill introduction sequence. Prioritize 3-5 high visibility bills in January. Use rules committee allies for floor access if secured in 1.1. Hearing participation. Prepare 5-7 targeted questions for every relevant committee hearing focusing on cost-benefit, influence mapping, and alternatives to open-ended commitments. District integration. Weekly constituent reports showing direct links between Washington actions and local outcomes, e.g., this spending restraint measure frees resources for domestic manufacturing jobs. 119th Congress, full agenda, operational track integration. Year 1 focus, defensive block harmful CRs, secure procedural advantages, pass 4-6 sovereignty bills. Year 2 focus, offensive appropriations riders, committee rule changes, parallel caucus formation, groundwork for 2026. Sample legislative vehicles. O. Sovereignty Reinforcement Act, Composite Bill bundling border metrics, FARA 2 revolving door extensions. O. National Interest Review Commission, temporary body to audit major foreign relationships against strict net benefit criteria. O. Appropriations riders across multiple bills, enforcing managed distance where intervention patterns exist. Integration with dual track. Public track, emphasize results and optimism, delivering on promises to put Americans first. Operational track, use AAR insights to prepare fallback amendments, coalition counts, and influence countermeasures for each agenda item. Pitfalls. Overloading the agenda, limit to 8-10 major items to avoid dilution. Leadership co-option, refuse compromise versions that restore foreign policy baselines without offsets. Media framing, prepare rapid response teams for narratives labeling restraint as isolationist. Metrics. At least 4 first 100 days, deliverables completed and messaged by April 30. 60% plus of 119th agenda items, advanced to committee markup or floor by end of session. 3.3 Establishing the Congressional Dual-Track Firewall. The dual-track firewall is the operational culmination of Phase I. It institutionalizes compartmentalization across the entire congressional enterprise. Firewall architecture. Governance document. Issue a 12-15-page dual-track congressional operations protocol signed by the Congressman and senior staff. Covers information flow, decision authority, and escalation paths. Physical/digital controls. O. Separate SharePoint congressional server folders. Track 1 public versus Track 2 operational. O. Encrypted communications for sovereignty audits, influence mapping, and personnel decisions. O. Weekly Track 1 all hands, bi-weekly restricted operational huddles, maximum 4-5 cleared personnel. Cross-phase integration. Link to committee assignments. 1.1. Operational designees prepare independent sovereignty assessments before engaging full committee processes. Link to personnel. 2. All new hires receive firewall training during onboarding. Violations constitute grounds for immediate termination. Link to knowledge transfer. Embed AAR insights into Track 2 risk register, e.g., campaign-identified pressure points from specific lobbying ecosystems require heightened monitoring. Daily weekly operating rhythm. Monday full office strategy alignment, Track 1 heavy. Tuesday/Wednesday, committee and legislative execution with operational filters applied privately. Thursday, sovereignty working group, restricted, review influence indicators, prepare amendments. Friday, district-focused public deliverables and constituent feedback loop. Crisis response protocols. Define triggers, sudden leadership pressure on foreign policy votes, leaked operational details, coordinated external campaigns. Escalation ladder, visible team handles public response, operational team manages internal countermeasures and documentation. Long-term maintenance. Quarterly firewall audits conducted by General Counsel. Annual refresh tied to new Congress cycle. Succession integration. Train deputy staff on dual-track mechanics for continuity. Practical examples: a new member uses the firewall when a major appropriations package includes unconditioned assistance to nations with active U.S. policy intervention. Publicly, we support targeted security cooperation but demand accountability. Operationally, staff prepares and lines up co-sponsors for a floor amendment imposing strict conditions and reporting requirements. The firewall prevents premature leaks that could trigger preemptive leadership retaliation. Pitfalls and safeguards. Staff resistance to perceived secrecy. Frame as professional operational security standard in high-stakes environments. Over-compartmentalization. Ensure visible team has enough context to perform effectively without sensitive details. Legal exposure. Regular consultation with House ethics and parliamentarian on all protocols. Templates for Section 3. 1. After-action review template, quadrant format with metrics. 2. First 100 days dashboard, tracking table with ownership and deliverables. 3. 119th Congress agenda matrix, priority vehicle, track 1-2 roles, success criteria. 4. Dual-track firewall protocol document, full draft outline. 5. Sovereignty assessment worksheet for every major bill or aid package. Net benefit score, influence risk, fiscal impact, recommended action. Conclusion for Phase I. By completing Sections 130, the America First Congressman has constructed a functional leadership firewall, professional personnel architecture, and operational posture ready for institutional entry. The office is no longer a campaign extension, but a sovereign governance unit capable of resisting absorption while advancing measurable priorities. This foundation enables confident movement into Phase II, mapping the broader congressional grid and classifying resistance nodes. The dual-track model is now active, public results delivered with operational realism, protecting the mandate. The Republic requires not just electoral victories but disciplined execution inside the arena. Phase I complete, proceed with vigilance. Section 4. Post-election institutional reconnaissance. With Phase I complete and the leadership firewall established, the America First Congressman must now conduct systematic reconnaissance of the congressional battlefield. Electoral victory grants entry into the institution, but the institution itself remains largely unchanged, staffed by legacy professionals, governed by entrenched procedures, and influenced by networks that often prioritize continuity in foreign engagements over strict American sovereignty. Phase II begins the process of mapping these realities so they can be navigated, de-layered where necessary, and ultimately reshaped. This reconnaissance is primarily an operational Track 2 activity. It must be conducted with high discipline, minimal leaks, and strict compartmentalization. Public Track 1 activity during this period focuses on constituent outreach, visible agenda rollout, and optimistic governance messaging. The operational track quietly builds the intelligence foundation for controlled institutional capture in Phase III. The core assumption guiding all reconnaissance remains transactional realism. Every foreign relationship is subject to continuous net benefit evaluation. Patterns of intervention in U.S. policymaking, whether through direct lobbying, campaign financing channels, staff placements, or pressure on key committees, warrant managed distance, enhanced transparency, and structural countermeasures. This standard is applied uniformly across all actors as standard sovereignty due diligence. 4.1 Mapping committee staff, parliamentarian, and institutional power centers. Effective power in Congress flows less through elected members and more through unelected professionals. Committee staff directors, general counsels, senior policy advisors, the parliamentarian's office, and long-serving House administration personnel. These nodes control information flow, procedural rulings, markup language, amendment feasibility, and long-term institutional memory. Systematic mapping protocol. Step 1. Immediate data collection, January-February. Compile public and internal sources. Legistorm profiles for all committee staff tenure, prior employers, salary history, education. Congressional staff directory, updates post-organization. Committee hearing transcripts and markup records from the prior Congress to identify recurring voices shaping outcomes. House clerk and committee websites for organizational charts. Create a secure internal database. Track 2 only with fields: name, position, tenure, prior employers, notable associations, policy tendencies, observable from past work, foreign contact indicators. Step 2. Load-bearing node prioritization. Focus first on the 5 critical committees identified in 1.1. Appropriations. Map all majority professional staff, especially state foreign operations and defense subcommittees. Identify who drafts baseline foreign assistance language and who controls anomalies or emergency supplementals. Rules. Map the council and parliamentarian adjacent staff who decide structured rule provisions. These individuals often act as quiet gatekeepers against sovereignty amendments. Judiciary. Map immigration enforcement and oversight staff. Note tendencies toward expansive interpretations of international agreements versus strict constitutionalism. Intelligence. Map cleared staff handling foreign influence briefings. Assess openness to reviewing domestic lobbying networks as threats to sovereignty. Foreign affairs. Map staff responsible for country-specific portfolios. Flag those with histories of uncritical advocacy for perpetual assistance relationships. Step 3. Parliamentarian and procedural mapping. The office of the parliamentarian is a critical choke point for bill germinous, budget reconciliation eligibility, and amendment rulings. Tactics. Request briefings through committee designees. Privately analyze past rulings on foreign policy and spending measures for patterns of institutional bias toward continuity. Map relationships between parliamentarian staff and key committee councils. Step 4. Broader institutional power centers. House administration controls office budgets, technology, and ethics guidance. Leadership offices, Speaker, Majority Leader, Whip, map senior policy and floor staff. CBO, GAO, CRS, identify analysts who score America First proposals. Note baseline assumptions that often embed perpetual foreign commitments. Republican Conference and Steering Committee staff, these shape member assignments and messaging. Analytical framework for each node assign risk-opportunity scores, 110 on. Alignment with sovereignty metrics, border enforcement, fiscal restraint, foreign influence, transparency. Foreign policy tendency, transactional restraint versus continuity bias. Revolving door risk, likelihood of future high-paying external placements. Influence susceptibility, observable from past employers or associations. Example application: an appropriations committee staff director with 14 years tenure, prior work at a major foreign policy think tank, and multiple transitions through firms representing nations with active U.S. lobbying patterns would receive a high resistance node classification. Operationally, the America First designee prepares independent markups while building relationships with more aligned junior staff for future placements. Tactics for intelligence gathering. Attend all committee organizational meetings and orientation sessions with prepared questions. Use operational staff to conduct discreet listening tour, informal conversations framed as onboarding. Cross-reference with public lobbying disclosure data and campaign finance records. Develop trusted relationships with America First aligned veteran members for off-record institutional history. Pitfalls and countermeasures. Over-reliance on public data. Supplement with operational observation of actual behavior in markups. Premature exposure. Never reveal full mapping effort. Frame inquiries as standard due diligence. Staff countermeasures. Legacy personnel may attempt to co-opt new members through flattery or selective information sharing. Maintain skepticism. Success metrics. Comprehensive map of 150+ key staff nodes completed by March 1. Risk register with prioritized load-bearing resistance points. At least 20 high-value relationships identified for tactical outreach. 4.2 Identifying foreign lobbying networks, AIPAC influence patterns, and revolving door activity. Foreign influence operates through layered channels, registered FARA agents, domestic lobbying cutouts, think tank funding, university donations, and revolving door pipelines. Reconnaissance must document these patterns methodically for later delayering. Mapping methodology. Foreign lobbying networks. Primary tools: FARA e-file database, Lobbying Disclosure Act (LDA) filings via Open Secrets, Senate foreign lobbyist registrations. Focus areas: adversarial actors, China, Qatar, Russia, Israel. Track United Front work, university funding, tech influence, and opaque NGO channels. Other significant principles: any nation showing patterns of heavy intervention in appropriations or foreign policy committees. Create network diagrams showing connections between registered agents, former staff, and current committee personnel. Specific influence pattern analysis, AIPAC and analogous groups. Document observable patterns, campaign contributions via affiliated PACs, grassroots mobilization targeting members, staff placements, and coordination on specific aid packages. Track metrics, total expenditures on direct lobbying versus independent expenditures, success rate on key votes, committee penetration, number of aligned senior staff. Operational posture: these patterns are treated identically to other major lobbying ecosystems, subject to transparency upgrades, disclosure requirements, and net benefit audits of resulting policy outcomes. No exemptions. Cross-reference with revolving door: identify former members or staff now employed by or closely coordinating with major foreign policy advocacy organizations. Revolving door activity: use Legistorm, revolving door tracker, and Open Secrets. Map: staff leaving high-influence committees for lobbying firms representing foreign principles. Former lobbyists entering committee staff roles. Cooling-off period compliance and loopholes. Example: a senior foreign affairs staffer departs for a firm handling military assistance advocacy, then reappears influencing related markups through informal channels. Flag for monitoring and future structural reforms, extended cooling-off disclosure. Integration with dual track. Public track, highlight general, restoring transparency and reducing all external influence on Congress, in hearings and constituent updates. Operational track, maintain detailed dossiers on specific networks, influence vectors, and leverage points, update weekly during first 6 months. Advanced reconnaissance techniques. Request GAO or CRS, reports on foreign influence trends through committee channels. Monitor think tank and NGO funding disclosures, foundation search, IRS Form 990s where available. Track university foreign gift, reporting under Section 117. Build a foreign influence heat map of the House, color-coded by committee, showing density of connections. Example: operational insight reconnaissance reveals that certain state foreign operations staff have repeated post-employment transitions to organizations heavily involved in specific bilateral assistance advocacy. The operational team then prepares appropriations riders requiring enhanced disclosure and competitive burden sharing analyses for all major recipients, while the public track emphasizes taxpayer accountability. Risk classification system. High resistance, staff with clear, ongoing patterns of shielding foreign principles from scrutiny. Moderate, those with legacy biases toward continuity, but open to data-driven restraint arguments. Low/opportunity, staff demonstrating instinctive sovereignty prioritization. Pitfalls. Confirmation bias, avoid overweighting any single network while ignoring larger aggregate foreign expenditures from adversarial states. Legal exposure, all mapping must remain factual based on public records or proper internal channels. Consult Ethics Council regularly. Retaliation, external networks may respond with pressure campaigns. Maintain strict OPSEC. Metrics for Section 4 success. Completed institutional map and foreign influence database by April 1. Identification of at least 12-15 priority resistance nodes for phase III targeting. Baseline measurements established for key indicators, lobbying expenditures by sector, revolving door events, committee staff alignment scores. 0 operational leaks during reconnaissance phase. Templates for phase II reconnaissance. 1 staff node profile template, detailed fields for mapping. 2 foreign influence network diagram guidelines. 3. Revolving-door tracking spreadsheet. 4. Risk register format with scoring rubric. 5. Weekly reconnaissance update memo for restricted distribution. Transition to Phase III readiness. By the conclusion of Phase II, the America First Office possesses superior situational awareness. The institution is no longer opaque. Resistance nodes are classified, influence pathways documented, and opportunities for parallel structures identified. This intelligence enables confident movement into controlled institutional capture, placing aligned personnel, building America First policy capacity, and reversing legacy friction points. Reconnaissance is not an end, but a continuous process. Update maps quarterly as staff transitions occur and new influence patterns emerge. The dual-track model protects this intelligence. Operational realism guides internal action, while public-facing governance maintains constituent trust and legitimacy. The work of Phase II transforms the Congressman from newcomer to informed operator. With the map in hand, the consolidation of America First power becomes executable rather than aspirational. Proceed deliberately and without illusion about institutional loyalties. Section 5. Classifying legacy nodes and resistance forces. Phase II reconnaissance produces raw intelligence. Section 5 converts that intelligence into an actionable classification system. Not every institutional actor opposes America First priorities, but many default to legacy patterns that normalize perpetual foreign commitments, resist transparency reforms, and protect spending baselines. Precise classification allows the dual-track operator to allocate resources efficiently, engage where tactical cooperation is possible, bypass where feasible, and prepare delayering strategies for load-bearing resistance. This classification is strictly operational Track 2. Public Track 1 continues projecting constructive governance, results delivery, and conference unity where possible. Premature public confrontation with classified nodes destroys leverage and invites coordinated pushback. The Gidding logic remains consistent. Foreign relationships are transactional. Any pattern of active intervention in U.S. appropriations, committee processes, or policy formation justifies managed distance, enhanced scrutiny, and structural countermeasures. This standard applies uniformly to all networks as standard sovereignty protection. 5.1 Load-bearing nodes. Appropriations, judiciary, intelligence, foreign affairs, ways and means. Load-bearing nodes are positions or offices whose capture or neutralization determines outcomes on core America First metrics: spending restraint, border enforcement, foreign influence transparency, and foreign policy realism. These are the arteries of institutional power. Appropriations Committee. Critical subnodes: Staff Director, Clerk, State Foreign Operations Subcommittee Staff, Defense Subcommittee Leads. Classification Criteria: High resistance if staff show patterns of defending baseline foreign military financing or assistance without rigorous net benefit analysis. Moderate if open to riders imposing conditions or offsets. Opportunity if aligned on domestic priority reallocations. Tactics: Deploy your own committee designee, from 2.2, to produce parallel markups using strict transactional scoring. Does this line item return measurable strategic autonomy or fiscal relief to American taxpayers? Build quiet coalitions for amendments reducing unconditioned aid to nations with documented intervention patterns. Example: in recent cycles, appropriations staff with long tenures routinely restored foreign aid baselines during conference negotiations, despite floor rhetoric on restraint. Classify these as high resistance and prioritize personnel placement or procedural workarounds. Judiciary Committee. Critical subnodes: Immigration Enforcement Council, Oversight Subcommittee Staff, General Counsel. Classification: Resistance is high when staff favor expansive interpretations of international obligations or resist FARA enforcement upgrades. Opportunity exists with staff who have state-level enforcement experience. Application: Use for legislation tightening asylum standards, strengthening foreign agent penalties, and oversight of NGOs facilitating external influence. Intelligence Committee. Critical subnodes: Cleared professional staff, Russia, China, Qatar portfolio leads. Classification: High value for monitoring adversarial influence. Resistance appears when staff downplay domestic lobbying networks as threats or compartmentalize allied intervention differently from adversaries. Tactics push for briefings on all foreign influence vectors, including lobbying ecosystems that distort congressional independence. Foreign Affairs Committee. Critical subnodes, country desk staff, authorization leads, oversight council. Classification, heavy resistance expected on transactional review proposals. Many staff default to continuity frameworks that treat certain relationships as permanent rather than auditable. Operational use, prepare hearings and amendments requiring periodic net benefit certifications for all major assistance recipients, including metrics on policy intervention and burden sharing. Ways and Means Committee. Critical subnodes, trade and tax policy staff. Classification, key for economic nationalism. Resistance often manifests as defense of status quo trade deals lacking reciprocity or tolerance of foreign-linked tax arrangements. Tactics, advance reciprocity legislation, and oversight of tariff enforcement against nations engaged in economic intervention. Classification scoring system, operational use only. Load-bearing resistance score, 110, based on tenure, prior employers, observable markup behavior and revolving door risk. Intervention pattern score, documented history of shielding specific foreign principles from conditions or transparency. Action category, engage/monitor/bypass/target for delayering. Example classification entry. Appropriations Staff Director, 12-year tenure, score 910 resistance, prior think tank work tied to perpetual assistance advocacy, prior employer revolving door to major lobbying entity. Action, target for parallel structure development and long-term replacement strategy. 5.2 Internal opposition, establishment Republicans and legacy staff. Internal opposition often presents the most immediate friction. Many establishment Republicans and legacy staff are not malicious, but operate under institutional incentives favoring stability, donor access, and conference harmony over disruptive sovereignty reforms. Classification of establishment Republicans. High-influence establishment, senior members on key committees with long donor ties to foreign policy continuity blocs, often prioritize responsible governance language that preserves foreign aid baselines and resists FARA strengthening. Moderate establishment, members open to tactical alliances on China containment or energy dominance, but defensive on broader restraint. Identification markers, voting history on past aid packages, public statements framing alliances as unbreakable, heavy coordination with legacy leadership staff. Legacy staff opposition patterns. Institutionalists prioritize how things are done over mandate delivery, often recommend softening sovereignty amendments to avoid floor fights. Networked operators maintain relationships with K Street think tanks and donor ecosystems, high revolving door risk. Passive resistors do not actively sabotage but slow walk operational requests, leak selectively to leadership, or provide incomplete information. Engagement strategies by classification. High opposition, strict compartmentalization, limit information flow, use parallel staffing for critical work. Moderate, tactical engagement on shared issues, border funding, China technology security, while protecting core sovereignty metrics. Monitoring protocols, track voting alignment, amendment co-sponsorship and staff interactions, update classification quarterly. Example: a senior establishment Republican on Rules Committee consistently blocks structured rules for sovereignty amendments citing conference unity. Classify as high internal resistance. Operational response, build alternative whip counts through Freedom Caucus and restraint-oriented members while maintaining public collegiality. Risks of mishandling internal opposition. Overconfrontation fragments the Republican majority needed for procedural victories. Underestimation allows quiet dilution of agenda items during conference negotiations. 5.3 External influence networks, adversarial foreign agents, major lobbying organizations, AIPAC and others, NGOs. And donor ecosystems. External networks constitute the most sophisticated resistance layer, They operate through campaign financing, staff pipelines, media pressure, and policy coordination. Adversarial foreign agents. Primary focus: China United Front economic leverage, Qatar ideological funding media, Israel ideological funding media, Russia and others. Classification: high threat when activities involve unregistered influence, university capture, or technology transfer risks. Prioritize FARA enforcement and funding transparency. Major lobbying organizations, including AIPAC and analogous groups. Document scale, tactics and outcomes uniformly. Track campaign expenditures, grassroots targeting of restraint advocates, staff placements and success rates on appropriations language. Operational posture, treat as any major foreign policy lobbying ecosystem. Patterns of heavy intervention in U.S. decision-making, particularly shielding aid from conditions or blocking transparency reforms, trigger classification as resistance nodes. Recommend uniform reforms, enhanced disclosure, foreign principal identification for affiliated entities, and net benefit audits for resulting policies. No special exemptions. Consistency protects against accusations of selective enforcement while advancing sovereignty. NGOs and think tanks. Map foreign funding sources. Section 117 University reports, Form 990s, Foundation databases. High resistance when organizations act as de facto advocates for specific bilateral relationships while receiving U.S. taxpayer-adjacent funding or influencing committee staff briefings. Donor ecosystems. Track major contributors to Republican members who condition support on foreign policy continuity. Classification: high influence when donor bundles correlate with softening on aid restraint or FARA bills. Integrated external mapping. Develop a resistance network diagram showing overlaps between external entities, legacy staff, and internal opposition. Prioritize nodes with highest leverage on appropriations and foreign affairs. Example classification: a major lobbying organization coordinates multi-million independent expenditures against members supporting aid conditionality amendments. Affiliated entities place former staff into committee roles. Classify as high external resistance node. Operational countermeasures: advanced disclosure legislation and appropriations riders requiring competitive policy audits for all major recipients. Defensive countermeasures across categories. Maintain detailed dossiers, secure compartmentalized. Develop influence risk brief for every major bill. Build counter networks with America First donors and policy groups. Pitfalls in classification. Overclassification, creating unnecessary enemies inside the conference. Underclassification, allowing mission drift through quiet co-option. Emotional or conspiratorial framing, stick to observable metrics, public records, and behavioral patterns. Success metrics for Section 5. Comprehensive classification matrix covering 200+ nodes, completed by May 1. At least 25 high-resistance load-bearing nodes, identified with tailored engagement delayering strategies. Quarterly updates showing movement in classifications, e.g., moderate nodes shifting toward opportunity through demonstrated results. 0 leaks of classification system or specific dossiers. Templates for Section 5. 1. Node classification matrix, Excel style with scoring fields. 2. Resistance profile template, detailed 1 page per high priority node. 3. Network diagram guidelines, visual mapping protocol. 4. Quarterly classification review protocol. 5. Engagement decision tree, based on classification level. Conclusion and transition to phase III. Classification completes the diagnostic phase of institutional entry. The America First Congressman now possesses a clear map of friendly terrain, neutral ground, and resistance strongpoints. This knowledge transforms reactive governance into strategic consolidation. With nodes classified, the office is prepared for phase III, strategic placement and parallel legislative structures. The dual-track model ensures public-facing optimism and results delivery, while the operational track executes quiet, methodical advancement against classified resistance. Discipline, documentation, and compartmentalization remain essential. The institution rewards those who understand its true power map rather than its public rhetoric. Proceed to controlled capture with eyes open and structure firm. Section 6. Counterintelligence and defensive operations. Phase II reconnaissance and classification have produced a detailed map of institutional terrain, resistance nodes, and influence pathways. Section 6 activates defensive measures to protect the America First mandate from leaks, co-option, insider threats, and external penetration. In Congress, information is power, and foreign or legacy networks excel at mapping new offices, identifying leverage points, and applying pressure through staff, donors, or procedural channels. Without robust counterintelligence, CI, and defensive operations, even the strongest personnel architecture and committee placements will erode over time. These activities are strictly operational. Track 2. Public Track 1 maintains a posture of constructive engagement, results delivery, and Republican conference cooperation. Any public hint of internal CI efforts invites accusations of paranoia and triggers defensive mobilization by classified resistance nodes. The Gidding operational principle remains unchanged. All foreign relationships are transactional arrangements evaluated by net benefit to American sovereignty, fiscal health, and autonomy. Patterns of intervention in U.S. policymaking, lobbying pressure, staff placement, campaign targeting, or policy distortion require managed distance and heightened defensive scrutiny. This applies uniformly across all actors. 6.1 Leak prevention, staff loyalty, and insider threat mitigation. Insider threats represent the highest near-term risk. Legacy staff, co-opted new hires, or even well-intentioned personnel under external pressure can leak operational plans, dilute sovereignty initiatives, or provide intelligence to resistance networks. Core defensive architecture. Information compartmentalization protocols, expanded from 3.3. Implement a formal need-to-know matrix for all sensitive materials. Sovereignty assessments, influence mapping dossiers, personnel classifications, amendment strategies targeting foreign operations baselines. Technical controls. Use dedicated secure folders on house systems, with audit logging enabled, encrypted messaging, signal or approved congressional secure apps for Track 2, and air-gapped devices for highest sensitivity items where feasible. Tiered access. O-Level 1 Visible Team, Public Agenda, Constituent Deliverables, General Legislative Tracking. O-Level 2 Operational Core, Committee Markups, Influence Risk Briefings. O-Level 3 Principal plus 2-3 Cleared, Full Resistance Node Classifications, CI Updates, Long-Term Delayering Plans. Weekly Audit, General Counsel reviews access logs for anomalies. B. Staff Loyalty and Continuous Vetting. Onboarding Loyalty Baseline. All staff sign enhanced compartmentalization and non-disclosure agreements tailored to congressional ethics rules. Include explicit acknowledgement of sovereignty first mandate. 90-day and semi-annual reviews, structured evaluations covering O. Policy consistency on transactional foreign policy, scenario-based questions. O. Discretion under pressure, simulated leak tests or external inquiry responses. O. Behavioral indicators, unusual external meetings, sudden shifts in stance on aid restraint, or excessive socializing with classified resistant staff. Red flag monitoring. O. Unexplained wealth or lifestyle changes, cross-check with financial disclosures. O. Frequent contact with known lobbying or donor ecosystem representatives. O. Selective leaking of Track 1 information to test reactions. Exit protocols, mandatory exit interviews, immediate account revocation, and 2-year cooling-off enforcement for any lobbying contact with the office or relevant committees. See Insider Threat Mitigation Tactics. Controlled dissemination. Use canary documents, slightly varied versions of sensitive memos distributed to different staff to trace leaks. Loyalty incentives. Tie advancement and bonuses to measurable sovereignty deliverables and demonstrated discretion. Recognize operators who surface external pressure attempts. Principal involvement. The Congressman conducts quarterly one-on-one sessions with senior staff focused on alignment and morale. Personal example of disciplined duality reinforces culture. External validation. Engage trusted third-party background firms for periodic deep checks on high-access personnel within ethics guidelines. Practical examples in past cycles, several restraint-oriented members experienced rapid softening of key amendments after legacy appropriations. Staff provided early warnings to external networks. In one documented case, operational Track 2 placement of a vetted military veteran as committee designee prevented dilution of foreign operations riders by maintaining independent analysis and controlled information flow. Early detection of a moderate resistance, staffers' pattern of informal briefings to establishment leadership allowed reassignment before damage occurred. Pitfalls and countermeasures. Paranoia eroding morale. Frame all CI as professional protection of the voter mandate, not distrust of individuals. Over-compartmentalization. Ensure operational staff have sufficient context to execute effectively. Legal risks. Consult House Ethics and Office of Congressional Workplace Rights Counsel on all monitoring protocols to avoid improper surveillance claims. Metrics for 6.1 success. 0 confirmed leaks of operational Track 2 materials in the first 12 months. 100% staff completion of semi-annual loyalty alignment reviews. At least 90% retention of vetted operational core staff through the end of the 119th Congress. 6.2 monitoring, transparency, and countering foreign influence operations. Defensive operations extend outward to monitor and neutralize external influence while advancing structural transparency reforms. This is proactive counterintelligence. Document, deter, and delayer. Monitoring protocols. Daily/weekly tracking. Automated alerts from FARA, LDA, Open Secrets and Legistorm for activity involving key committees or staff. Monitoring of foreign gift reports, university foreign funding, and think tank donor disclosures. Social and professional network analysis of classified resistance nodes, using public sources only. Influence indicators dashboard Track 2 only. Volume and targeting of lobbying expenditures on sovereignty-related bills. Patterns of campaign contributions, time to key votes or markups. Staff transitions between Congress and entities representing foreign principles. Pressure campaigns on specific members, tracked via public reporting and allied intelligence. Transparency as offensive defense. Legislative vehicles. Push FARA 2 enhancements. Mandatory registration for de facto agents operating through domestic cutouts, increased penalties, public database improvements, and funding for DOJ enforcement. Revolving Door Reform Act. Extend cooling-off periods for foreign policy and appropriations staff to 3-5 years. Require disclosure of all post-employment negotiations. Foreign Funding Disclosure Act. Mandate reporting for think tanks, NGOs, and universities receiving substantial external support when engaging in policy advocacy. Oversight hearings as platforms. Use judiciary, foreign affairs, and intelligence committees to expose aggregate influence patterns without selective targeting. Public Track 1 frames these as restoring American sovereignty and congressional independence from all external principles. Appropriations riders. Condition funding for agencies on improved enforcement against unregistered influence. Require net benefit certifications for major foreign assistance recipients. Countering specific operations. Adversarial state actors, China, Qatar, Israel, Russia, prioritize classified briefings and unclassified reports on technology theft, ideological funding, and influence in policy nodes. Operational countermeasures include support for CFIUS strengthening and supply chain security bills. Major lobbying networks monitor uniformly. When patterns emerge of coordinated pressure on appropriations, e.g., shielding specific aid baselines or targeting restraint advocates, prepare defensive amendments and coalition whip counts. Classify heavy intervention as resistance regardless of domestic popularity. NGO/donor ecosystems. Track funding flows supporting legacy staff or opposing transparency bills. Counter through public sunlight and parallel America First donor cultivation. Defensive OPSEC and rapid response. Threat response ladder. O-Level 1 Routine pressure, document and compartmentalize. O-Level 2 Targeted campaign, activate allied members for counter-messaging, prepare ethics referrals if violations suspected. O-Level 3 Insider compromise, immediate isolation, investigation and personnel action. Media and narrative defense, maintain alternative media pipelines, track 1 to bypass legacy outlets. Rapid response team pre-drafts counters to expected attack lines, disruptive, conspiracy, etc. Allied network building, quiet coordination with other America First and restraint-oriented offices for shared early warning. Advanced tools and resources, leverage GAO requests, CRS reports, and IG referrals through committee placements. Develop internal influence risk scoring for legislation, foreign intervention factor plus fiscal drain plus sovereignty erosion. Annual State of Foreign Influence, internal report for the office and trusted allies. Examples from institutional history members who implemented early CI practices, e.g. strict staff vetting and parallel analysis in appropriations, successfully advanced multiple foreign aid conditionality measures despite external opposition. In contrast, offices without defensive operations often saw sovereignty agenda items quietly removed in conference. 1-2023-2024 for example involved a freshman using compartmentalized monitoring to anticipate and neutralize a coordinated push to restore foreign operations baselines during a CR negotiation. Pitfalls in counter-influence operations. Selective enforcement appearance, maintain uniform data-driven standards across all networks. Resource drain, limit CI to high-leverage nodes, avoid exhaustive surveillance. Escalation risk, defensive moves must remain within house rules and ethics boundaries, document everything. Metrics for 6.2 success. Establishment of functioning influence dashboard with weekly updates. Advancement of at least 2-3 major transparency or reform bills riders by end of first session. Measurable reduction in successful external interventions on office priorities, tracked via amendment success rate and markup outcomes. Identification and mitigation of at least 8-10 active influence vectors. Templates for Section 6. 1. Need-to-know access matrix spreadsheet template. 2. Staff loyalty review questionnaire semi-annual. 3. Influence indicators dashboard key metrics and alerts. 4. Threat response playbook escalation ladder with sample actions. 5. Foreign influence risk scoring worksheet for bills and relationships. 6. SI weekly briefing template restricted distribution. Integration with overall dual track and transition to phase III. Counterintelligence and defensive operations form the protective shell around the America First consolidation project. They ensure that reconnaissance 4 and classification 5 translate into protected execution rather than vulnerability. The leadership firewall from Phase I is now hardened against both internal drift and external penetration. Public Track 1 continues delivering visible results on border metrics, spending restraint and energy dominance, maintaining constituent legitimacy. Operational Track 2 executes quiet monitoring, loyalty enforcement and preparation for structural reforms. This duality prevents absorption while building capacity. With defensive posture solidified, the office is ready for Phase III, strategic placement, parallel structures, and controlled institutional capture. The institution tests every new member. Those who master counterintelligence endure and reshape it. Discipline in these operations separates transient reformers from those who achieve lasting America First entrenchment. Execute relentlessly, document thoroughly, and protect the mandate. Section 7. Strategic placement and parallel legislative structures. Phase II's reconnaissance, classification, and defensive operations have delivered situational awareness and protection. Phase III shifts to offense, controlled institutional capture through strategic personnel placement, and the construction of parallel legislative structures. The America First Congressman must now convert intelligence into power, embedding aligned operators in key nodes while building independent capacity that bypasses legacy friction. This is the heart of the dual-track model in action. Public Track 1 advances visible sovereignty wins, while Operational Track 2 methodically places talent and constructs alternative pathways that reduce dependence on resistance nodes. Success here determines whether the office becomes a temporary irritant to the institution or a durable engine of consolidation. Placement and parallel structures must be executed with precision, ethics compliance, and long-term sequencing. The Gidding principle remains transactional realism. Every foreign relationship undergoes continuous net benefit evaluation. Patterns of intervention in U.S. policymaking, lobbying pressure on committees, revolving door influence, or distortion of appropriations, require managed distance, enhanced transparency, and structural reduction. This standard is uniform and data-driven. 7.1 Critical Staff Director, General Counsel, and Professional Staff Placements. Personnel placement in load-bearing positions is the highest leverage activity in Phase III. A vetted America First Staff Director on Appropriations or General Counsel on Judiciary can redirect outcomes for years. Prioritization of placement targets. 1. Committee Staff Director/Deputy Director roles, Appropriations, Rules, Judiciary, Foreign Affairs. 2. General Counsel and Senior Policy Counsel across priority committees. 3. Professional staff on subcommittees handling foreign operations, trade, immigration, and intelligence. 4. Leadership and conference policy staff, Speaker's Office, Republican Conference. 5. Parliamentarian adjacent and House administration positions, longer term. Placement tactics. Internal advancement. Promote from within the office's operational Track 2 talent pool. Example, move a vetted appropriations designee, hired in Phase I, into a full committee professional staff role by cultivating relationships with the chair or ranking member. Cross-office coordination. Quietly coordinate with other America First and restraint-oriented members to pool candidates and support joint placements. Use classified node assessments from Section 5 to identify vacancies or retirement windows. Leadership negotiation. Frame requests as strengthening governing capacity on sovereignty and fiscal issues. Offer trade-offs on lower priority assignments. Timing windows. End of first session, summer-fall, natural staff turnover. Post-midterms or major reorganizations. Retirement waves in high-tenure nodes. Vetting and insertion protocol. Apply enhanced 2.3 vetting plus committee-specific stress tests. Draft language conditioning assistance on verifiable non-intervention in U.S. appropriations. Insertion plan, 30-60-day shadowing period followed by principal sponsorship in interviews. Dual-track safeguard. Place staff maintain reporting channels back to the Congressman's operational core while operating within committee structures. Practical examples in recent Congresses, members who secured aligned professional staff on state foreign operations successfully advanced multiple riders, imposing reporting requirements and burden-sharing metrics on assistance packages. One office's placement of a former state budget analyst as Deputy Staff Director on Appropriations blocked restoration of unconditioned baselines during conference by providing independent scoring and amendment alternatives. In contrast, offices without such placements saw sovereignty priorities diluted despite strong member rhetoric. Pitfalls and countermeasures. Resistance pushback. Legacy networks may attempt to block or co-opt placements. Counter with pre-vetted alternative candidates and documented justifications tied to member priorities and committee effectiveness. Talent scarcity. Develop a bench through fellowships and state-level recruitment. Invest in training programs on appropriations mechanics and sovereignty metrics. Ethics compliance. Full disclosure of placement efforts through proper channels. Maintain records of all communications. Metrics for 7.1. At least 3-5 critical placements, including 1 staff director or equivalent, by end of first session. 70% plus success rate on sovereignty-related markups amendments in committees with placed staff. Quarterly Placement Opportunity Tracking Report, Track 2. 7.2 Building America First Policy Shops, Working Groups and Caucuses. Parallel structures create independent capacity that survives resistance in legacy committees. These entities serve as doctrine hubs, legislative drafting factories, and coalition builders. Core parallel structures to establish: America First Policy Shop, Internal Office Unit, staffed by 3-5 Operational Track 2 personnel. Responsibilities: independent bill drafting, sovereignty risk assessments, alternative markup language, long-term agenda modeling. Example output: National Interest Foreign Policy Review Act, legislation requiring periodic transactional audits of all major relationships with metrics on intervention patterns, fiscal cost, and strategic return. Member-led working groups: Sovereignty and Restraint Working Group, cross-committee group focused on border metrics, FARA enforcement and foreign operations baselines. Economic Nationalism Task Force, trade reciprocity, supply chain security and manufacturing resurgence. Transparency and Influence Reform Group, revolving-door, foreign funding disclosure and lobbying reforms. Tactics: invite moderate members on shared issues, China security, energy, while maintaining operational control through cleared staff. Formal caucuses: expand or co-found an America First caucus, emphasizing sovereignty, fiscal discipline, and foreign policy realism. Secure formal House recognition, dedicated resources and regular briefings. Use for whip operations, hearing coordination and public messaging amplification. Operational integration: parallel structures feed Track 1 with polished deliverables, hearing questions, op-eds, constituent reports, while developing Track 2 products, detailed influence maps, amendment portfolios. Weekly synchronization: Policy Shop reviews all major legislation through the Sovereignty Scorecard, fiscal impact, intervention risk, domestic priority alignment. Expansion tactics: partner with external America First think tanks and state-level organizations for research support, carefully vetted for alignment. Host closed briefings with experts on adversarial influence and transactional foreign policy models. Develop shadow markups for every major appropriations or authorization bill. Examples: offices that built robust parallel working groups in the 118th 119 Congresses, advanced more amendments on foreign aid conditionality and transparency than peers reliant solely on committee processes. One such group successfully coordinated 15+ members to force floor debate on FARA strengthening provisions despite initial rules committee resistance. Pitfalls: fragmentation, ensure parallel structures remain subordinate to the Congressman's dual-track doctrine. Optics risk: public Track 1 frames these as enhancing member-driven governance and accountability, not opposition. Resource drain: limit to 3-4 high-impact groups initially. Metrics: operational policy shop, producing 20+ major deliverables per session. Caucus/working group membership of 25+ House Republicans by end of 119th. At least 8-10 bills or riders originating from parallel structures advancing to committee. 7.3 Expanding influence within the Republican conference. Institutional capture requires broadening influence beyond the office and immediate allies. This is coalition building with discipline. Mapping and engagement strategy. Use Section 5 classifications to identify moderate and opportunity nodes within the conference. Prioritize outreach to members on key committees who share fiscal or sovereignty concerns, even if they differ on specific bilateral relationships. Tactics: regular policy dinners, joint amendment packages, and shared oversight projects framed around common America First elements: border security, debt reduction, China competition. Leadership pathway: secure appointments to conference committees, task forces, or whip teams. Demonstrate value through reliable vote delivery on must-pass legislation, while quietly advancing riders and reforms. Long-term, position for leadership challenges or committee chairmanships post-2026. Donor and external network cultivation. Build America First aligned fundraising infrastructure, emphasizing sovereignty metrics and results. Cultivate relationships with donors focused on fiscal restraint and reduced entanglements rather than single-issue continuity. Narrative and influence operations. Public Track 1. consistent messaging on delivering measurable results for American taxpayers through disciplined governance. Operational Track 2, track conference sentiment via cleared allies, prepare counterarguments to legacy framing, isolationism, disruption. Risk management, avoid public fractures that empower Democrats or media narratives. Maintain firewalls against co-option, tactical alliances never compromise core sovereignty KPIs. Monitor for mission drift indicators, softening on transparency or aid baselines. Example members who methodically expanded conference influence through working groups and targeted placements successfully shaped rules committee outcomes on amendment access and blocked several unfavorable CR provisions in recent cycles. Those who isolated early lost procedural leverage. Pitfalls are overexpansion diluting standards, vet all coalition partners against sovereignty consistency. Leadership capture, use placements and parallel structures as insurance against absorption. Burnout, rotate operational staff supporting expansion efforts. Metrics for 7.3. Influence score increase, measured by successful amendments, co-sponsorship rates on America First bills, and committee assignments for aligned members. Conference working group or caucus delivering at least 4-6 legislative victories per session. 15-20 new tactical alliances, cultivated by end of 119th Congress. Templates for Section 7. 1. Placement Opportunity Tracker, database template with classification integration. 2. Policy Shop Charter and Workflow, standard operating procedures. 3. Working Group Formation Memo, sample language and structure. 4. Conference Influence Mapping Matrix. 5. Sovereignty Scorecard for Legislation, quantitative evaluation tool. 6. Parallel Structure Progress Dashboard. Conclusion. For Phase III, strategic placement and parallel structures mark the transition from defensive consolidation to active reshaping of institutional incentives. By embedding aligned personnel and building independent capacity, the America First Congressman reduces reliance on legacy nodes and creates self-reinforcing advantages. The dual-track model protects this process. Visible results build public and conference legitimacy, while operational realism executes the hard work of capture. This phase demands patience, precision, and relentless execution. Resistance will intensify as influence grows. Maintain compartmentalization, ethics discipline, and focus on measurable sovereignty outcomes, reduced foreign intervention pathways, fiscal baseline discipline, and restored congressional primacy. With these foundations, the office is prepared for Section 8's legislative delayering, oversight, and friction reversal. The institution is being repurposed. Continue with discipline. Section 8, Legislative Delayering, Oversight, and Friction Reversal. Phase III has embedded aligned personnel and constructed parallel structures. Section 8 translates that capacity into active legislative operations, delayering legacy friction points, weaponizing oversight, and reversing institutional inertia that favors perpetual foreign commitments and external influence. This is where the dual-track model delivers measurable governance results. Public Track 1 showcases tangible wins for constituents, reduced waste, stronger borders, restored sovereignty. Operational Track 2 executes precise delayering, removing procedural obstacles, exposing influence pathways, and institutionalizing America First advantages through rules changes and targeted reforms. Delayering is not destruction, but strategic pruning, stripping away layers of resistance that insulate foreign policy continuity from voter accountability. Every action remains grounded in transactional realism. Foreign relationships are arrangements judged by net benefit to American security, prosperity, and autonomy. Patterns of intervention in U.S. appropriations, committee processes, or policy formation justify managed distance, enhanced transparency requirements, and structural reforms. This standard is applied uniformly and data-driven, without exemptions or sentimentality. Execution in this phase must be disciplined. Overaggression risks conference isolation. Under-execution allows mission drift. Leverage committee placements, 7.1, and parallel structures, 7.2, to maximum effect while maintaining defensive operations, 6. 8.1 Weaponizing appropriations and targeted oversight. Appropriations and oversight are the most potent tools for immediate impact. They control funding flows and public narrative simultaneously. Appropriations delayering tactics. Rider strategy. Use your place staff and policy shop to draft precise riders on all major bills, base appropriations, supplemental CRs, omnibus packages. Examples. Foreign operations. None of the funds made available may be used for assistance to any nation whose government, agents, or affiliated entities have engaged in lobbying or influence activities targeting U.S. appropriations processes exceeding X in the prior fiscal year, unless a net benefit certification is submitted and approved. Defense and intelligence. Conditions on funding tied to burden-sharing metrics and restrictions on technology security cooperation, with nations showing high intervention patterns. Domestic offsets. Reallocate savings from foreign baselines to border enforcement, domestic manufacturing, or debt reduction. Zero-based review process. Through parallel structures, develop independent baselines for every foreign assistance account. Challenge automatic continuations with data on fiscal drain and strategic return. Conference negotiation playbook. Prepare fallback positions and whip counts in advance. Use place staff to influence markups before conference. If leadership pushes restoration of baselines, force recorded votes to expose positions. Targeted oversight operations. Hearing preparation. Operational Track 2 develops 10-15 sharp questions per hearing focused on cost-benefit analyses of specific relationships. Documentation of foreign lobbying expenditures and staff interactions. Metrics on intervention patterns, revolving door timelines, campaign pressure correlations. Alternatives to open-ended commitments, sunsets, conditions, competitive bidding. GAO/IG/CRS requests. Route through judiciary, foreign affairs, intelligence and appropriations to audit foreign aid effectiveness, FARA compliance gaps, and revolving door activity. Witness strategy. Prioritize America first aligned experts, whistleblowers on influence operations, and executive branch officials under pressure to defend continuity. Public Track 1 frames hearings as the taxpayer accountability and restoring congressional oversight. Integration with dual track. Public highlight wins. This rider saves X billion for American priorities while demanding reciprocity. Operational. Use oversight data to update resistance node classifications and refine placement targets. Practical examples in recent appropriation cycles, members with strong committee placements and parallel drafting capacity successfully attached multiple conditionality riders to state foreign operations bills, forcing reporting on burden sharing and intervention risks. Offices without delayering capacity saw these provisions stripped in conference. One effective operation involved coordinated oversight hearings, exposing aggregate foreign lobbying trends, which built support for subsequent FARA amendments. Pitfalls and countermeasures. Leadership clean CR pressure, prepare public and procedural counters, tie support to inclusion of priority riders. Committee chair resistance, use rules placement if secured or floor amendments to force debate. Media blowback, pre-brief allied outlets with data packets emphasizing fiscal responsibility and sovereignty. Metrics for 8.1. At least 812 sovereignty-focused riders or amendments advanced per appropriation cycle. 3-5 major oversight initiatives, hearings, reports, referrals, completed annually. Measurable baseline reductions in targeted foreign operations accounts, tracked via CBO Congressional Budget Office scoring. 8.2 Foreign influence transparency reforms, FARA enforcement, AIPAC and similar lobbying disclosure. Transparency reforms are structural delayering tools that reduce external leverage over time. FARA strengthening legislation. Core provisions to advance. Close loopholes for domestic entities acting as de facto foreign agents. 501. C. Organizations, think tanks, universities with policy advocacy. Increase penalties and DOJ funding for enforcement. Mandatory disclosure of foreign funding sources for policy influencing activities. Expanded definitions covering indirect influence on appropriations and committee staff. Vehicle strategy, standalone bill or incorporation into NDAA, State Department authorization or appropriations. Use parallel policy shop for drafting, secure co-sponsors through working groups. Lobbying disclosure enhancements. Uniform treatment. Require detailed reporting for all major foreign policy lobbying ecosystems, including campaign coordination, grassroots targeting, and staff placements. Revolving door transparency. Public database of post-Congress employment negotiations, extended cooling off for foreign policy appropriations roles. Foreign funding disclosure for institutions. Expand Section 117 reporting. Require think tanks and NGOs engaging Congress to disclose major external principles. Operational execution. Markup and amendment playbook. Prepare sovereignty scorecards for every related bill. Use placed counsel to propose strengthening amendments. Coalition building. Tactical alliances with members concerned about adversarial influence, China, Qatar, while maintaining uniform standards. Oversight integration. Use intelligence and judiciary hearings to document compliance gaps and influence patterns across all networks. Public framing. Restoring congressional independence and American sovereignty from all external principles, adversarial or otherwise. No special exemptions. Examples: recent attempts to strengthen FARA have gained traction when tied to broader transparency packages. Offices leveraging parallel structures successfully forced disclosure amendments during authorization markups, exposing revolving door patterns that previously operated with minimal scrutiny. Consistent application across networks prevented selective enforcement narratives. Pitfalls. Bipartisan resistance on specific lobbies, anchor in data and uniform principles. Dilution in conference, pre-commit whip counts and floor alternatives. Umplumentutpun gaps, include mandatory GAO audits of new requirements. Metrics. PISP or significant advancement of at least one major transparency package per Congress. Uncrossed FARA registrations and enforcement actions attributable to legislative pressure. Reduct pun in undisclosed influence indicators on priority committees. 8.3 Regulatory relief, sunset clauses and committee rule changes. Delayering extends to procedural and regulatory architecture that entrenches legacy priorities. Regulatory relief and sunset clauses. Attach sunsets to foreign assistance authorizations, 3 5-year reviews with net benefit Rusatafakutpun. Push regulatory rollbacks on agencies involved in foreign policy implementation that exceed statutory authority or embed external influence. Exemplar, sunset provisions on specific aid programs lacking demonstrated reciprocity or showing intervention patterns. Committee rule changes. RULA's committee leverage. Advocate for member amendments on all bills, reduced leadership discretion on structured rules, and public disclosure of staff influence logs. Appropriatpun's committee. Require independent CBO-style scurrung for foreign operations, mandatory public net benefit statements. Foreign Affairs Judiciary. New oversight subcommittees focused on influence transparency and sovereignty metrics. General House rules. Support reforms increasing transparency in conference negotiations and reducing earmark-like foreign policy continuations. Implementation roadmap. Shut-tum first session. Pilot changes via individual committee resolutions and amendment packages. Mudum build coalition for broader House rules package in the 120th Congress. Parallel support. Use policy shop to draft model rule language and justification memos. Broader friction reversal. Challenge must pass assumptions on CRs and omnibus packages by forcing recorded votes on sovereignty provisions. Bold precedent through consistent application. Every major bill receives sovereignty filter review. Examples: targeted committee rule, changes in recent Congresses, expanded amendment access for fiscal restraint advocates. Members who combined placements with rule reform efforts successfully embedded sunset clauses in authorization bills, forcing periodic reevaluation of long-standing commitments. Pitfalls and safeguards. Prosujked complexity. Rely on placed parliamentarian adjacent staff and external counsel. Rutaloushan. Maintain strong defensive CI and public results focus. Mushan creep. Tie all changes to explicit sovereignty and fiscal KPIs. Metrics for 8.3. At least 4.6 rule changes or sunset provisions enacted or advanced. Uncrusad amendment success rate on priority legislation, target 40% plus. Documented procedural friction reduction, fusto advancement of America First vehicles. Templates for Section 8. 1. Appropriatpun's rider template library, categorized by account. 2. Avksat hearing question bank, sovereignty focused. 3. Transparency bill drafting checklist. FAS sovereignty scorecard V20 for legislation and rules changes. 5. Dularan campaign tracker, phased milestones. 6. Committee rule reform proposal template. Conclusion and transition to phase IV. Legislative delayering, aggressive oversight, and friction reversal mark the operational maturation of the America First Office. By weaponizing appropriations, advancing transparency reforms, and ultung procedural defaults, the Congressman begins shifting institutional incentives towards sovereignty and restraint. The dual-track model ensures these efforts produce visible constituent results, while operational realism protects and expands gains. Resistance will adapt through conference negotiations, external pressure, and narrative attacks. Maintain compartmentalization, rigorous metrics, and ethical documentation. Success in Phase III 8.0 creates momentum for long-term entrenchment in Phase IV, midterm defensa, durable advantages, and succession planning. The institution is yielding ground. Measure progress relentlessly against core KPIs, reduced harmful foreign influence pathways, fiscal baseline discipline, and restored American primacy in decision-making. Phase IV awaits. Section 9. Narrative consolidation and sustained public legitimacy. Phase III's legislative delayering and institutional placements generate real policy friction and measurable progress. However, power consolidation fails without sustained public legitimacy. Voters who delivered the America First mandate expect visible results and outsider authenticity, not gradual assimilation into Washington norms. Section 9 focuses on narrative control, building direct communication channels that bypass legacy media, weaponizing oversight as accountability thutta, and preserving the credible outsider posture while executing governance. This phase bridges the dual-track model's tension. Public Track 1 projects competence, results, and optimism to constituents and the broader Republican conference. Operational Track 2 protects the harder internal work from narrative attacks. The underlying doctrine remains fixed. Foreign relationships are strictly transactional, judged by net benefit to American citizens. Any pattern of external intervention in U.S. policymaking triggers managed distance, transparency enforcement, and sovereignty-first adjustments. This standard is applied uniformly and factually, serving as a consistent governance filter rather than selective rhetoric. Effective narrative consolidation turns potential vulnerabilities, resistance to legacy foreign policy patterns, into strengths, demonstrated independence, fiscal discipline, and restored congressional primacy. 9.1 Direct-to-constituent and alternative media pipelines. Legacy media and institutional gatekeepers often frame America First restraint as disruptive or fringe. Direct pipelines neutralize this by owning the narrative. Building direct-to-constituent systems. Wakla/Monthla updates. Establish a professional constituent email SMS list segmented by issue priority, border, spending, energy, sovereignty. Content. Plain language reports on specific wins. This appropriations rider cuts X million in unconditioned foreign assistance, redirecting to domestic border infrastructure. Dustruct digital infrastructure. Invest in a robust office website, mobile app, or member-branded platform for real-time dashboards on key metrics, border encounters, debt trajectory, energy production, foreign influence disclosures. Town halls and field events. Schedule regular in-district and virtual events focused on results. Use data visualizations from parallel policy shop outputs. record and repurpose high-quality segments. CUSWOC amplification, transform individual constituent successes, veterans' benefits secured, regulatory relief delivered into broader sovereignty narratives. Alternative media and digital amplification. Platform strategy, prioritize X, Rumble, Substack, Truth Social and emerging America First outlets. Develop a content calendar, 60% results delivery, 30% oversight highlights, 10% forward-looking agenda. Content doctrine, short data-heavy videos and threads. Example format, Week X update, advanced 7 sovereignty amendments, blocked Y in wasteful baseline spending. Here's the net benefit to your district. Unad media, cultivate relationships with independent journalists and podcasters focused on fiscal realism and foreign policy restraint. Provide exclusive briefings with placed staff insights, sanitized for Track 1. RUPUD response team, dedicated staff monitors legacy media and external pressure. Counter within 4-6 hours with facts, not personal attacks. Maintain message discipline. We evaluate every relationship by what it delivers for American taxpayers and security. No exceptions, no sacred cows. Operational integration. Track 2 supplies raw data, influence maps, rider impacts, oversight findings, to Track 1 for polishing and distribution. Mutruk's dashboard shared publicly on select KPIs while protecting sensitive operational details. Practical examples: members who invested early in direct pipelines during the 118th Congress maintained higher approval ratings despite controversial votes on foreign operations baselines. One office's weekly sovereignty scorecard, email series correlated with stronger primary performance and increased small dollar donations. Offices relying on traditional press secretaries saw narratives dominated by legacy framing of isolationism. Pitfalls and countermeasures of Kamusajang on sensitive classifications, never leak Track 2 materials, all public content cleared through visible team. Digital burnout, automate where possible, focus on high-signal content. Platform risk, diversify channels and maintain email SMS ownership as the primary list. Metrics for 9. 1. 80% plus constituent open engagement rate on direct communications. Minimum 500K plus monthly impressions across alternative platforms by end of first year. 20% plus increase in small dollar fundraising tied to narrative deliverables. Quarterly constituent polling showing sustained outsider delivering results sentiment. 9.2 Oversight hearings as platforms for America First accountability. Oversight hearings are not mere procedural obligations, they are premier narrative platforms when properly prepared. Hearing strategy development. Selection criteria. Prioritize hearings on appropriations, foreign operations waste, judiciary, FARA gaps, border metrics, intelligence, all-source influence threats, and foreign affairs transactional reviews. Preparation pipeline, operational policy shop delivers. Detailed briefing books with sovereignty scorecards. Witness vetting and question banks emphasizing net benefit failures, intervention patterns, and reform alternatives. Visual aids, charts showing aid trajectories versus domestic needs, revolving door timelines, lobbying expenditure correlations. Question discipline, every question advances the frame. What measurable return justifies this baseline commitment? How does the department track foreign principal influence on policy? Why are certain relationships exempt from standard transparency? Public amplification. Live stream clips optimized for short-form platforms, 60-second hearing highlight reels. Post-hearing constituent reports. We exposed X billion in unaccounted influence pathways and forced new reporting requirements. Bipartisan leverage, where possible on adversarial threats, while maintaining uniform standards on all foreign principles. Delayering through hearings. Forced testimony on revolving door activity, undisclosed foreign funding, and compliance failures across lobbying ecosystems. Use findings to justify legislative vehicles, FARA upgrades, disclosure bills, appropriations riders. Examples: effective oversight in recent Congresses turned obscure appropriations markups into viral moments by highlighting specific waste and intervention patterns. Members with strong parallel preparation consistently shifted media cycles toward fiscal sovereignty, building public support for subsequent rule changes and transparency bills. Hearings that avoided selective targeting and focused on systemic metrics proved more durable against counter-narratives. Pitfalls are gotcha theatre without substance, focus on data and reform proposals. Witness evasion, prepare follow-ups and document non-responses for reports. Media framing, pre-brief allies and have alternative distribution ready. Metrics, minimum 12 high-impact hearing participations per session. At least 5 hearings generating significant alternative media traction, 1M impressions. Legislative deliverables directly tied to oversight riders, bills advancing at 50% plus rate. 9.3 Maintaining outsider credibility while governing effectively. The core tension of the dual-track model, govern inside the institution without losing the outsider edge that justifies the mandate. Credibility preservation tactics. Results discipline, prioritize and loudly communicate concrete deliverables, passed amendments, blocked spending, exposed influence, constituent wins, avoid vague working on language. Rhetorical consistency, public language emphasizes America first realism, transactional assessment of all relationships, no permanent entanglements that drain resources or compromise sovereignty. Personal branding, the Congressman maintains an authentic voice, town halls without scripts, unfiltered digital engagement, willingness to explain hard choices, e.g. This aid package fails the net benefit test given documented intervention patterns and domestic priorities. Conference navigation, public collegiality with leadership, while operational track 2 advances independent capacity. Frame disagreements as principled policy differences on how best to deliver for the American people. Balancing governing and outsider posture. Vote strategy, support must-pass legislation with recorded reservations or amendments, use yes with reforms framing. Primary defense, consistent sovereignty metrics inoculate against challenger attacks from the right. Long-term narrative arc, position the office as the vanguard of institutional renewal. We entered Congress to change it, not join it. Risk management, mission drift signals, softening rhetoric on foreign baselines, staff migration to influence-heavy roles, reduced direct communication volume, address immediately via internal reviews. External attacks, anti-ally or disruptive labels, counter with data, we support cooperation that serves American interests, blank checks and shielded influence do not. Staff alignment, regular training reinforcing duality, govern effectively while protecting the mandate. Examples: several restraint-oriented members in recent cycles maintained strong outsider credibility by pairing aggressive oversight with tangible legislative wins, riders, disclosures. Those who communicated directly and consistently outperformed peers who defaulted to institutional messaging, as evidenced by fundraising, polling, and primary results. Pitfalls are purity versus pragmatism imbalance, tactical compromises are necessary, core metrics are not. Overexposure, protect operational details while maximizing visible results. Complacency, schedule annual outsider audit reviewing narrative alignment. Metrics for 9.3. Sustained or improved net approval/favorability in district polling. Outsider credibility score, internal survey or third party, above 75%. 0 major narrative collapses, e.g., major unforced softening on sovereignty issues. Successful navigation of at least one major conference test, CR debt limit, rules package with America First provisions intact. Templates for Section 9. 1. Weekly constituent update template, structure and examples. 2. Hearing preparation checklist, data, questions, visuals. 3. Digital content calendar, 30, 60, 90-day planning tool. 4. Sovereignty messaging bank, core phrases and frames. 5. Narrative risk register, drift indicators and responses. 6. Outsider credibility dashboard, key metrics and tracking. Conclusion for Phase III and transition to Phase IV. Narrative consolidation completes the operational triad of Phase III, placement, parallel structures, and public legitimacy. By mastering direct pipelines, oversight platforms, and credible duality, the America First Congressman sustains the voter mandate while executing internal consolidation. The public sees results and authenticity. The institution encounters disciplined, structural resistance to legacy patterns. This foundation is essential for Phase IV's long-term entrenchment. Without sustained legitimacy, midterm defenses weaken and succession falters. With it, the dual-track model becomes self-reinforcing. Visible sovereignty wins build political capital for deeper operational advances. Measure everything against core deliverables. Communicate relentlessly. Govern as an outsider who understands power. The mandate is not preserved by rhetoric alone, but by results protected through disciplined narrative control. Proceed to Phase IV with consolidated legitimacy and operational momentum. Section 10. The new firewall sustaining America First advantage in Congress. Phase IV shifts from initial capture to long-term entrenchment. By this stage, the America First Congressman has built a leadership firewall, Phase I, mapped and defended against resistance, Phase II, and executed controlled institutional capture through placements and parallel structures, Phase III. Section 10 establishes the new firewall, a durable architecture that protects and expands America First gains against the constant institutional pressures of absorption, electoral cycles, and renewed external influence. This is not static defense but active advantage multiplication. The goal is to make reversion to legacy patterns more costly and difficult than continued sovereignty-focused governance. Public Track 1 emphasizes results, stability, and majority building, delivering for American workers, taxpayers, and security through disciplined leadership. Operational Track 2 focuses on structural insulation, midterm reinforcement, and institutional advantages that compound over redistricting and leadership transitions. The core doctrine remains unchanged. Foreign relationships are transactional and subject to rigorous net benefit evaluation. Any patterns of intervention in U.S. policymaking, lobbying pressure, revolving-door pipelines, or distortion of congressional priorities demand managed distance, transparency, and reduction. This standard is applied uniformly through data, metrics, and procedure. 10.1 2026 Midterm Defense and Majority Expansion Strategy. Midterms are the decisive test of consolidation. A successful America First office not only survives but expands the bench, strengthens committee leverage, and entrenches procedural advantages. Defensive posture for incumbency. District fortification. Maintain relentless constituent engagement via Track 1. Quarterly, Sovereignty Scorecard, reports showing tangible wins, border encounter reductions secured through oversight, spending restraint riders passed, energy permitting reforms advanced, and transparency measures enacted. Use district staff to build a permanent grassroots network tied to measurable deliverables rather than national headlines. Early warning system. Operational Track 2 monitors district-specific threats, coordinated opposition research from external networks, donor shifts, or local media framing. Update from Section 6 CI protocols with midterm-specific indicators, polling on foreign policy restraint, economic nationalism sentiment. Resource allocation. Direct 40% of office and campaign resources to defense in the 18 months preceding the 2026 election. Prioritize high-turnout precincts and demographics responsive to sovereignty messaging. Majority expansion strategy. Recruitment pipeline. Identify and support America First primary challengers and open seat candidates using the personnel vetting standards from Section 2.3. Focus on districts where transactional foreign policy restraint, fiscal discipline, and economic nationalism poll strongly. Targeted support. Provide model legislation, amendment language, and hearing preparation templates from the policy shop, 7.2. Coordinate campaign intelligence, sharing via secure channels with vetted allies. Deploy placed committee staff and parallel caucus resources to brief candidates on institutional mechanics. Conference positioning. Use expanded influence from 7.3 to shape steering committee assignments favoring new America First members. Prioritize appropriations, rules, judiciary, and intelligence for the incoming class. Tactical alliances. Build broader coalitions on shared priorities, China containment, border enforcement, energy dominance, while protecting core sovereignty metrics through dual-track compartmentalization. Distinguish tactical partners from those requiring ongoing operational monitoring for mission drift on foreign entanglements. Electoral playbook elements. Messaging discipline, public track 1, America First results versus Washington continuity. Highlight specific metrics, reduced foreign operations baselines, FARA enforcement funding increases, revolving door disclosures advanced. Data-driven targeting. Use voter files, internal polling, and influence mapping to identify persuadable voters on sovereignty issues and counter external lobbying pressure in the district. Fundraising synchronization. Align campaign finance with institutional advantages. See 10.2. Prioritize donors committed to long-term restraint over single-issue continuity. Redistricting preparation. Begin quiet mapping of post-2026 redistricting scenarios. Cultivate state legislative allies to protect America First incumbents and create favorable new districts. Example execution members who implemented similar midterm defense architectures in prior cycles, heavy district grounding, plus parallel policy support for allies, expanded their working majorities on key votes and secured better committee placements for aligned freshmen. Offices that neglected operational firewall maintenance often faced primary challenges or softened legislative postures heading into re-election. Risks and mitigation. Overextension. Focus expansion on high-probability districts. Avoid national overreach that dilutes office focus. External targeting. Strengthen CI Section 6 against coordinated opposition from classified resistance networks. Mission drift during campaigns. Enforce strict alignment reviews for any softening on net benefit foreign policy standards. Metrics for 10.1. Successful defensive seat with improved vote share or margins. Net gain of 815 America First aligned House members in the 2026 cycle. At least 60% of new members receiving priority committee assignments through conference influence. Maintained or improved sovereignty voting cohesion score within the expanded group. 10.2. Building durable institutional and fundraising advantages. Long-term entrenchment requires structural advantages that persist beyond any single member or Congress. The new firewall institutionalizes America First operating norms. Institutional advantages. Committee rule changes push permanent reforms in priority committees. Mandatory net benefit scoring for all foreign operations and trade items. Enhanced minority amendment rights on sovereignty bills. Regular transparency audits of staff revolving door activity and foreign influence disclosures. Parallel infrastructure expansion. Evolve the policy shop into a semi-formal America First legislative research office, coordinated across multiple members. Develop proprietary tools, influence mapping databases, sovereignty scorecards, and amendment libraries. Succession pipelines. Identify and mentor junior members and senior staff for leadership tracks. Create internal training programs on dual-track doctrine, transactional foreign policy analysis, and institutional mechanics. Procedural memory. Document all successful tactics, placements, and delayering moves in a secure institutional playbook, updated each session. Ensure continuity through staff transitions. Fundraising and resource advantages. America First PAC caucus alignment. Build or strengthen affiliated entities focused on sovereignty metrics. Prioritize donors who support uniform restraint, fiscal responsibility, and reduced external influence across all relationships. Donor vetting and cultivation. Apply adapted personnel vetting standards to major contributors and bundlers. Emphasize long-term structural advantages, e.g., permanent changes to foreign aid baselines and durable transparency reforms over transactional single-issue asks. Digital and small donor infrastructure. Develop direct-to-constituent fundraising pipelines emphasizing Track 1 results. Reduce dependence on K Street or legacy donor ecosystems. Resource leverage. Use committee placements to direct oversight and GAO resources toward validating America First priorities. Convert successful appropriations riders into recurring budgetary advantages. Metrics-driven sustainability. Establish private KPIs dashboard. Track 2. Foreign influence reduction. Track year-over-year changes in relevant lobbying expenditures, FARA registrations, and revolving door events on priority committees. Fiscal sovereignty. CBO scored baseline reductions in unconditioned foreign operations spending. Institutional penetration. Number of aligned staff in load-bearing nodes. Success rate of parallel-originated legislation. Early warning. Staff turnover patterns to external influence-linked firms, voting deviations on core metrics. Integration with dual track. Public track 1. Celebrate aggregate wins and majority momentum to sustain voter enthusiasm and deter challenges. Operational track 2. Use the new firewall to protect against absorption during periods of leadership pressure or coalition negotiations. Longer-term horizon, post-2026. Prepare for 2028 presidential alignment and post-redistricting consolidation. Develop contingency protocols for minority status, robust parallel structures and minority oversight tools. Cultivate relationships with Senate counterparts for bicameral sovereignty coordination. Practical examples: offices and factions that built durable firewalls in prior reform waves, e.g., sustained committee rule changes, and independent research capacity, maintained influence across multiple congresses despite electoral volatility. Those relying solely on personal charisma or temporary majorities often saw gains reversed within one cycle. Pitfalls and safeguards. Complacency after gains. Treat every session as phase II reconnaissance redux. Fundraising capture. Maintain strict separation between donor preferences and core sovereignty doctrine. Institutionalization of dual track. Train successors rigorously to prevent dilution of compartmentalization. Templates for Section 10. 1. 2026 Midterm Playbook. Timeline, resource allocation, metrics dashboard. 2. New firewall institutional reforms checklist. 3. Sovereignty KPIs dashboard template with tracking formulas. 4. Succession and mentorship protocol. 5. Long-term fundraising strategy matrix. 6. Post-redistricting contingency plan outline. Conclusion for Phase IV and the manual. The new firewall completes the transition from insurgent outsider to entrenched institutional operator by defending midterms, expanding the majority, and embedding durable structural advantages. The America First Congressman ensures the movement survives contact with Washington realities and compounds power over time. This manual's dual-track model, public idealism delivering visible results protected by operational realism and compartmentalization, is now self-sustaining. The right hand advances the sovereign agenda for American citizens. The left hand methodically reduces harmful external influence pathways and builds lasting capacity. No foreign relationship receives sentimental exemption, all are judged by net benefit and managed accordingly. Electoral victory was the entry point. Disciplined execution of these phases transforms the institution rather than being transformed by it. Maintain vigilance against mission drift indicators. Section 11. Develop the next generation. 12. Measure relentlessly against genuine sovereignty metrics. The Republic's renewal depends on this operational discipline. Implement, iterate, and entrench. America First is no longer protest, it is governance architecture. Section 11. Metrics of genuine renewal versus institutional capture. Phase IV's new firewall is designed for durability, but institutions possess powerful immune responses. Even well-executed dual-track operations can gradually erode if mission drift is not detected and corrected early. Section 11 establishes rigorous, measurable standards to distinguish genuine America First renewal from subtle institutional capture. This is the diagnostic and accountability core of the entire manual. Without objective metrics, public rhetoric of sovereignty easily masks operational drift toward legacy spending baselines, normalized foreign entanglements, and restored external influence pathways. These metrics operate primarily on operational track 2 for private monitoring and course correction. Public track 1 selectively communicates aggregate wins to constituents and the conference, America first delivering measurable sovereignty and fiscal results. The foundational principle remains fixed. Foreign relationships are strictly transactional, evaluated by net benefit to American security, prosperity, and autonomy. Patterns of intervention in U.S. policymaking, whether through lobbying pressure, staff influence, campaign targeting, or policy distortion, require managed distance, transparency reforms, and measurable reduction. Uniform application of this standard, grounded in data, protects against selective enforcement while serving as the ultimate safeguard against absorption. 11.1 Key performance indicators: sovereignty, reduced harmful foreign influence, economic nationalism. Effective KPIs must be quantifiable, auditable where possible, and tied directly to the core mission pillars. Track them quarterly in a secure internal dashboard maintained by the General Counsel and Policy Shop. Review personally with the Congressman and operational core staff. Set ambitious but phased targets for the 119th Congress and beyond. Sovereignty and border security KPIs. Border enforcement metrics. Track year-over-year reductions in illegal encounters, gotaways, and recidivism, rates attributable to legislation, oversight, or funding secured by the office or aligned coalitions. Target: 20–40% reduction in key district-relevant categories by end of 119th Congress through sustained appropriations riders and judiciary oversight. Interior enforcement actions. Number of successful oversight-driven increases in ICE border patrol funding and policy changes, e.g., ending catch-and-release via conditions on DHS appropriations. Measure against baseline pre-inauguration levels. Asylum and legal immigration reforms. Passage or advancement rate of bills imposing stricter reciprocity standards and merit-based systems. Track successful amendments blocking expansive interpretations of international obligations. Fiscal responsibility and appropriations discipline KPIs. Foreign operations baseline reductions, dollar value and percentage of unconditioned foreign military financing, economic support baselines, reduced or conditioned through appropriations work. Target: minimum 15–25% aggregate reduction in non-strategic accounts by end of 119th, with net savings redirected domestically. Overall spending restraint, CBO scored or office estimated savings from successful riders, rescissions, and rule changes. Track debt trajectory impact and earmark opaque supplemental avoidance rate. Entitlement adjacent discipline. Votes and amendments blocking automatic growth in programs with foreign policy spillovers or weak sovereignty alignment. Foreign policy restraint and influence reduction KPIs. Transactional review implementation. Number of major bilateral relationships subjected to formal net benefit audits, intervention risk, fiscal cost, strategic return. Target: at least 6–8 major relationships reviewed annually via foreign affairs appropriations vehicles. FARA and transparency enforcement. Increases in DOJ FARA registrations, penalties secured through oversight or legislation. Reduction in identified unregistered influence activity on priority committees, tracked via public disclosures and internal mapping. Revolving door reduction. Decline in staff transitions from key committees to entities representing foreign principles. Measure cooling off compliance and post-employment disclosure rates. Foreign funding disclosure. Advancement of legislation and successful GAO audits covering universities, think tanks, and NGOs. Track year-over-year decreases in opaque external funding influencing policy nodes. Aid conditionality success rate. Percentage of assistance packages receiving meaningful conditions, burden sharing, non-intervention certifications, policy reciprocity. Uniform application across all recipients is the key consistency metric. Economic nationalism and energy dominance KPIs. Trade reciprocity measures. Number of successful reciprocity amendments or bills targeting unfair practices, supply chain vulnerabilities, and economic intervention by foreign actors. Energy production metrics, permitting reforms, leasing expansions, and domestic output increases advanced through oversight or legislation. Track against pre-office baseline. Manufacturing and supply chain resilience. Bills or riders successfully moving critical industries onshore or reducing adversarial dependencies. Institutional power consolidation KPIs. Aligned staff penetration. number percentage of load-bearing positions, staff directors, council, professional staff, occupied by vetted America First personnel. Parallel structure output, legislative vehicles originating from policy shop working groups advancing to markup or floor. Target, 40% plus of office-driven agenda items. Conference influence score, co-sponsorship rates on sovereignty bills, success rate of procedural maneuvers, and committee assignment quality for aligned members. 2026 expansion, net seat gains and quality of new member placements. Dashboard implementation, use a weighted scoring system, e.g., sovereignty 40%, fiscal 25%, influence reduction 20%, institutional 15%. Color-coded alerts, green on track, yellow monitor, red course correction required. Independent validation, cross-check with public data, CBO, GAO, open secrets, FARA filings, and allied offices. Example application, an office achieving 22% reduction in targeted foreign operations baselines, passage of enhanced FARA penalties, and 3 aligned staff director placements would score strongly on renewal metrics. Public Track 1 highlights taxpayer savings and restored congressional independence. Operational Track 2 drills into whether reductions applied uniformly and whether influence mapping shows actual decreases in intervention patterns. 11.2 Early warning signs of mission drift and establishment recapture. Metrics alone are insufficient without vigilant monitoring for subtle drift. Institutional capture often occurs gradually through normalized compromises, staff evolution, and shifting incentives. Personnel and staff drift indicators. Increased hiring or retention of staff with prior ties to classified high-resistance nodes or entities representing foreign principles. Rising percentage of senior staff departures to K Street, foreign policy lobbying firms, or continuity-oriented think tanks. Softening in internal sovereignty scorecard evaluations during policy recommendations. Legislative and voting drift. Declining support for net benefit amendments on foreign operations or transparency bills. Acceptance of clean CRs or omnibus packages restoring baselines without offsets. Prioritization of conference harmony language over measurable sovereignty outcomes in public statements. Influence and relationship management drift. Reduced emphasis on uniform transactional audits. Emergence of sentimental or exemption-based framing for specific relationships. Decreased activity on FARA enforcement, revolving door reforms or foreign funding disclosure. Staff or member participation in events coordination with major lobbying networks showing intervention patterns without corresponding defensive countermeasures. Institutional behavior indicators. Committee assignments or placements increasingly favoring legacy operators over operational realists. Erosion of dual-track compartmentalization, increased leaks, blurred information tiers. Shift in hearing questions and oversight priorities away from influence reduction toward continuity management. Donor and external pressure indicators. Rising share of fundraising from ecosystems tied to perpetual foreign commitments. Softening polling response or internal polling on core restraint messaging. Increased external coordination with establishment leadership on foreign policy votes. Response protocols for detected drift. Yellow threshold, immediate operational review, staff realignment sessions, and intensified CI monitoring. Red threshold, full dual-track reset, personnel shake-up, agenda recalibration, and potential public course correction messaging, framed as refocusing on voter mandate. Quarterly mission health audit, conducted personally by the Congressman with General Counsel and LD. Long-term safeguards. Embed automatic sunset reviews in all major initiatives. Tie staff performance bonuses and promotions explicitly to KPI achievement. Develop succession purity tests for key roles emphasizing consistent transactional realism. Practical examples: several reform-minded members in recent congresses showed early yellow indicators through gradual staff turnover to influence-linked firms and softening on appropriations riders. Those who acted on metrics revetting, parallel structure reinforcement, recovered trajectory. Others who ignored warnings experienced measurable mission erosion by the end of their second term, with reduced sovereignty voting cohesion and weaker 2026 positioning. Pitfalls in metrics application. Over-reliance on quantitative data without qualitative context, e.g., tactical compromises for larger gains. Gaming the system, staff producing performative activity that fails net benefit tests. Public overexposure, keep detailed red-yellow diagnostics strictly track 2. Success metrics for Section 11. Fully operational KPIs dashboard updated quarterly with clear trends. At least 75% of priority KPIs on green or improving yellow trajectory by end of 119th Congress. 0 unaddressed red indicators persisting more than 1 quarter. Annual mission health audit demonstrating sustained differentiation from legacy patterns. Templates for Section 11. 1 comprehensive KPIs dashboard, spreadsheet with weighted scoring, trend lines, alerts. 2 mission drift early warning checklist, quarterly audit form. 3 sovereignty scorecard template for individual bills relationships. 4 net benefit audit framework, standardized evaluation rubric. 5 annual renewal report outline, internal and selective public versions. 6 course correction protocol playbook, triggers and actions. Conclusion for Section 11. Metrics transform the dual-track consolidator from aspirational doctrine into accountable governance. Genuine renewal is proven by measurable reductions in harmful foreign influence pathways, restored fiscal and border sovereignty, and entrenched institutional advantages. Institutional capture is revealed by stagnation or reversal on these same indicators, often accompanied by normalized continuity in transactional relationships that should remain under strict scrutiny. Review these metrics ruthlessly. Share aggregated wins publicly to build legitimacy. Use granular operational data to correct course before drift becomes capture. Combined with succession planning in Section 12, this framework ensures the America First mandate outlasts any single Congress or external pressure campaign. The institution will always seek equilibrium around legacy patterns. Rigorous metrics are the shield and compass. Measure, adjust, and consolidate relentlessly. This is how electoral victories become enduring national renewal. Section 12, Succession Protocol and Movement Continuity. The ultimate test of institutional capture is not what one Congress achieves, but whether the America First mandate survives leadership transitions, electoral volatility, redistricting, and the natural entropy of Washington. Section 12 establishes the final component of the dual-track consolidator, a deliberate succession protocol and long-term power architecture that turns temporary gains into generational advantage. Without this, even the strongest leadership firewall, personnel placements and metrics, Section 11 risk becoming another reform wave that crests and recedes. This section operates at the strategic apex of the dual-track model. Public Track 1 projects confidence, results and movement strength, building the next generation of leaders who deliver for American sovereignty and prosperity. Operational Track 2 executes quiet, disciplined continuity planning that protects doctrine against dilution. The unchanging doctrinal core remains. Foreign relationships are strictly transactional arrangements judged by net benefit to American citizens. Any patterns of intervention in U.S. policymaking, lobbying, revolving-door influence, campaign pressure, or policy distortion require managed distance, transparency, and reduction. Uniform, metrics-based application of this standard across all actors is non-negotiable for genuine continuity. 12.1 Developing the next generation of America First leaders. Succession is not delegation, it is engineered replication of the dual-track doctrine. The goal is to create a self-reinforcing bench of congressmen, senior staff, and future candidates who internalize operational realism without losing public authenticity. Talent identification and pipeline construction. Internal bench development. Within the office, designate succession tracks for high-potential staff, especially operational Track 2 realists. Provide structured rotations across committee placements, policy shop, and district operations. Require mastery of sovereignty KPIs, net benefit analysis, and compartmentalization protocols. Junior member mentorship. Identify promising first and second-term America First members through conference influence. 7.3. Offer. O. Shadowing on key markups and hearings. O. Access to the policy shop's amendment libraries and influence mapping tools. O. Joint oversight projects focused on foreign operations baselines and transparency reforms. State and local pipeline. Recruit from state legislatures, governors' offices, and America First aligned local officials who have proven records on border enforcement, spending restraint, and economic nationalism. Apply adapted vetting from Section 2.3, with heavy emphasis on consistent transactional foreign policy views. External ecosystems. Partner with vetted fellowships, think tanks, and policy programs emphasizing restraint and sovereignty. Screen rigorously for foreign influence vulnerabilities and doctrinal alignment. Training and indoctrination protocol. Dual-track academy, internal program, annual 4-6-week intensive for selected staff and junior members covering O. Institutional mechanics, appropriations riders, rules strategy, parliamentarian navigation. O. Sovereignty scorecard application and net benefit auditing of foreign relationships. O. Psi compartmentalization and mission drift detection, sections 6 and 11. O. Scenario exercises, draft and amendment conditioning assistance on non-intervention metrics while maintaining conference viability. Field training, assign mentees to lead specific projects, e.g., a foreign funding disclosure rider or district sovereignty town hall series, with senior oversight and after-action reviews. Doctrine transmission, require all mentees to produce annotated versions of key manual sections. Personal principle briefings on the rationale for uniform transactional standards, no sentimental exemptions for any relationship showing intervention patterns. Leadership development cadence. Year 1-2, exposure and technical mastery. Year 3-4, independent project leadership and coalition building. Year 5+, committee placement sponsorship, caucus roles, and primary open seat preparation. Annual bench review, operational track 2 assessment of 10-15 high potential individuals against KPIs and drift indicators. Practical examples offices and factions that invested in deliberate succession, mentorship pipelines, plus parallel structure exposure. In prior reform, efforts produced multiple committee chairs and sustained influence across redistricting cycles. Those who neglected this saw gains evaporate when original members retired or faced challenges. With staff scattering to legacy networks and doctrine diluting. Pitfalls and safeguards. Nepotism or loyalty over competence. Enforce rigorous performance metrics and independent evaluations. Premature elevation. Require demonstrated results on sovereignty KPIs before major responsibilities. External capture of talent. Maintain strict cooling off and non-compete norms for alumni. Metrics for 12.1. Minimum 8-12 fully trained successors, staff plus junior members, ready for elevated roles by end of 119th Congress. 70% plus retention and advancement rate of VUTAD talent. At least 4-6 mentees securing improved committee assignments or primary wins in 2026, 2028 cycles. 12.2 Long-term power architecture post-redistricting. Redistricting, typically post-2030 census, offers both risk and opportunity. The new firewall must anticipate demographic shifts, partisan map drawing, and institutional evolution. Redistricting preparedness. Preemptive mapping. Beginning in 2027, Operational Track 2 develops district-specific sovereignty profiles using census projections, voter data, and polling on core issues, border security, fiscal restraint, transactional foreign policy. State-level alliances. Cultivate relationships with America First state legislators and governors to influence map drawing where Republicans control processes. Prioritize protection of incumbent strongholds and creation of new opportunity districts. Defense of protocols. Prepare legal and public affairs contingencies for adverse maps. Use parallel structures to document and challenge gerrymanders that dilute sovereignty-focused voters. Post-redistricting power architecture. Committee and leadership entrenchment. Use accumulated influence to lock in America First presence on appropriations, rules, judiciary, and intelligence regardless of individual seat changes. Advocate for permanent rule changes, favoring sovereignty metrics, e.g., mandatory net benefit reviews. Qatar's institutionalization. Evolve the America First Caucus into a formal, well-resourced entity with dedicated staff, research capacity, and whip operation. Secure budget lines and procedural recognition. Multi-Congress planning. Develop rolling 4- and 8-year agendas that survive member turnover. A Fuzz A defensive. Lock in transparency reforms and baseline reductions. A Fuzz B offensive. Full foreign operations overhaul, revolving door elimination, and economic nationalism implementation. Fundraising architecture. Build endowment-style reserves and recurring donor pipelines tied to long-term KPIs rather than individual candidates. Create a dedicated America First Continuity Fund for succession support. Digital and infrastructure legacy. Maintain secure, transferable databases, influence maps, KPI dashboards, amendment libraries, with succession protocols for access and updates. Movement-wide continuity measures. Doctrine codification. Regularly update this manual and supporting playbooks. Distribute selectively to VUTAD successors. Network resilience. Foster a decentralized but coordinated national network of America First offices, sharpen best practices while preserving operational security. Contingency for setbacks. Protocols for minority status, leadership losses, or adverse elections. Emphasize parallel structures, minority oversight tools, and accelerated bench development. Generational handover. By year 8-10 of sustained service, the original Congressman transitions to elder statesman mentor role, with clear power transfer to proven successors. Risk management across horizons. Monitor macro trends. Demographic shifts affecting sovereignty sentiment, technological changes in influence operations, and evolving foreign principal tactics. Unyard power architecture audit. Assess structural advantages against potential erosion points, donor shifts, staff agging, conference realignments. Exit and legacy planning. Ensure the Congressman's departure strengthens rather than weakens the movement through documented handovers and protected institutional gains. Practical examples: long-term factions that built post-redistricting architectures, state alliances, plus institutionalized caucuses, plus transferable research capacity, maintained disproportionate influence despite seat losses. Short-sighted operations often collapsed when key members retired or districts shifted, with knowledge and placements dissipating into the legacy system. Pitfalls and countermeasures. Personalization of power. Tie success to doctrine and metrics, not individuals. Of centralization. Encourage distributed leadership while maintaining doctrinal coherence. Resource exhaustion. Balance aggressive expansion with sustainable infrastructure. Metrics for 12.2. Redistricting resilience. Maintenance or net gain in America First seats post-cycle. Institutional entrenchment. Sustained or increased aligned staff placements and committee rule advantages across congresses. Succession yield. Minimum 60% of priority positions filled by internal bench graduates within 2 cycles. Longevity score. America First voting cohesion and KPI achievement maintained at 80% plus levels post-leadership transitions. Templates for Section 12. 1. Success Development Tracker, individual profiles with milestones and evaluations. 2. Dialtrek Academy Curriculum Outline. 3. Redistricting Preparedness Playbook. 4. Long-term Power Architecture Roadmap, 8-12-year horizon. 5. Movement Continuity Audit Template. 6. Handovke Protocol Checklist. Final conclusion. The dual-track consolidator in practice. This completes the operational manual. From the inauguration firewall through personnel architecture, reconnaissance, capture, delayering, entrenchment, metrics, and succession, the dual-track model provides a complete doctrine for transforming electoral victory into lasting institutional power. The right-hand public-facing delivers visible results on border security, fiscal restraint, energy dominance, economic nationalism, and constitutional governance. The left hand, operational, quietly maps resistance, places loyal operators, builds parallel capacity, counters influence, and entrenches structural advantages. Compartmentalization protects both from absorption and attack. America First is not nostalgia or protest. It is realistic statecraft updated for 21st century threats, adversarial influence operations, fiscal insolvency, sovereignty erosion, and sophisticated lobbying ecosystems. No foreign relationship receives automatic deference. All are audited transactionally. Uniform scrutiny and managed distance where intervention patterns exist are essential to Rusterung American primacy. Implement this manual with discipline. Reference it constantly. Update it as the institution evolves. Measure relentlessly against the KPIs in Section 11. Develop successors who exceed the founder in execution. The Republic was designed for self-government by vigilant citizens and their representatives. Electoral success grants entry. The dual-track consolidator equips you to hold and expand power without surrendering the mission. Public legitimacy protected by private realism. Visible sovereignty backed by invisible structural consolidation. This is how movements become governing majorities. This is how America First becomes the enduring architecture of the House Republican Conference and, ultimately, national renewal. Execute, consolidate, entrench. The work continues.